What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to do a full story video. A full story video is when I sit down and take a bunch of videos that tell one overarching story and combine them together into one big video. Now, today's full story video is going to be about the X-Men once again, the Uncanny X-Men series that leads into Fatal Attractions. As we all know, Fatal Attractions was a very big crossover for X-Men comics, but when it came to the Uncanny X-Men series leading into that event, you had our heroes trying their best to figure out to find a cure for the legacy virus. And as we all know, the legacy virus was relieved by Strife at the very end of the Executioner's song. And so with that virus, it's now killing off mutants left and right. And so you see our heroes trying their best to figure out if they can find a cure for that virus, but to also save the life of a young girl. And her name is Illyana, the younger sister of Colossus, who has the legacy virus. Here are the stories that lead into Fatal Attractions and even after Fatal Attractions as well. And we see our heroes trying their best to deal with the idea of the legacy virus. What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. All right, so we are going to continue our coverage over the X-Men, but now it's time for us to jump into some, well, Uncanny X-Men once again. And we pick up with issues number 298, 299, and the big issue 300. Now, this is a three-part story arc where we are beginning to work our way up to Fatal Attractions when it comes to Uncanny X-Men. But we're also seeing some new things coming into the actual book. Like, for example, the return of Magneto is coming very soon. But on top of that, we're also beginning to see a new virus coming into the world of Marvel Comics that is going to target the mutant race and slowly kill them off if somebody is infected by this new kind of virus, better known as the legacy virus. Now, with all that being said, let's go ahead and dive into Uncanny X-Men issue number 298 to start off today's video as the first chapter. And so getting into today's video, we actually pick up with Charles Xavier in the Ready Room. Now, the Ready Room is actually a new concept in X-Men comics at this point. You see, for Charles Xavier, he is using Shi'ar technology, but also being able to gather information from different sources across the world to be ready for anything to come down the road. You see, for Charles Xavier, he is really concerned about the actual future for the mutant race. Because for Charles Xavier, thanks to the Executioner's song, where he learned about Cable, Strife, and also now Bishop, he's realizing that the future is very dark for the mutant race. But at the same time, you also have different groups popping up, different groups of evil mutants popping up left and right and causing more problems for the mutant race. But at the same time, for the humans, they're also making their own groups as well to hopefully kill off the mutant race. And so for Charles, it's just him wanting to be ready for anything to come down the road. Now, while you have Charles Xavier in the Ready Room, he is then confronted by Bishop. You see, for Bishop, he feels like that he does not fit in with the rest of the X-Men. And so he kind of feels like he needs to leave the X-Men. Now, the reason why Bishop feels that way is because really, for Bishop, it's all about the idea of how he handled things. You see, for Bishop, he's really more of, you know what, let's go ahead guns blazing. And I want to make sure I take those guys down and not really try to work with other people around him. For him, it's more of a direct approach. And for the X-Men, they're kind of like, dude, we don't work that way. And so for Bishop, he kind of feels like he does not fit in at all and he wants to leave the X-Men. But you have Charles say, no, you're not leaving. And really, I feel like with you being around, is beginning to help us realize that we have to change to be ready for what's to come down the road. But now we have to jump over to a character called Sharon Freilander. Now, Sharon Freilander first appeared back in New Mutants issue number 19. Now, originally, she was a Caucasian woman who was then changed into a Native American. Now, I don't really want to sit down and try to explain how in the world she was changed into a Native American. Just know it happened. Either way, she used to work at Charles Xavier School as a nurse, but thanks to X-Men Inferno, when the school got blown up, she had to move on with her life. And she did. She found a different school to work at, which is called Our Mother of the Sacred Heart. Either way, she is a nurse there as well. But while she's working there, out of nowhere, she is attacked from behind, killed off just like that. And we never see her again. Now, I want to jump over to Bishop, Archangel, Jean Grey, and also Gambit. And the reason why, because you have those four characters in the Danger Room, but I really want to focus more on Bishop and Gambit. And the reason why, because for Bishop and Gambit, they don't get along. And really because where Bishop comes from, you see, in the far future, Bishop had learned that the X-Men were killed off thanks to a traitor on their own team. And he met the future version of Gambit. And so the Bishop, he believes the actual traitor is going to be Gambit. So even though he joined the X-Men and he's trying his best to get along with every single member of the X-Men, not really when it comes to Gambit, because he believes that Gambit might sooner or later do something to the X-Men. But either way, you have Jean Grey say, you two need to learn how to work together. And that is why we are currently in the Danger Room. Now, before Sharon had officially died, she was able to call out to Charles Xavier to inform him what happened to her. And so when we jump over to Charles Xavier and also Storm, we see them currently meeting up with Detective Charlotte Jones. Now, Charlotte Jones was actually dating Archangel around his time in Marvel Comics. Either way, once you have Charles get the call from Sharon, he realized what happened to her and he goes over to call the X-Men. And let's not forget that Gambit, Archangel, Beast, and also Jean Grey were in the Danger Room. And so once they get the call from Charles Xavier, they're like, okay, you know what, guys? We got to go right now. Apparently, something big has happened, and Charles needs us right now in a hurry. But getting back over to Our Mother of the Sacred Heart, we actually pick up with Tom Corsi. Now, Tom Corsi, just like Sharon, was a Caucasian character who was turned into a Native American, but he also worked at the same school that Sharon did. And so he is a bus driver, and when he pulls up to the school with a bus full of kids, he realized there is something wrong. But also Sharon is not outside to greet the kids. And so he realized something is about to happen. And so he begins to back up. And that is the moment the school blows up. And that is when we learn that basically Sharon was killed off by the acolytes. Now, the acolytes were a small group of characters who used to follow Magneto like he was their god, because they believed in what Magneto believed, that basically the human race is trying to kill off the mutant race, and mutants should rise up and get rid of the human race. And so they went ahead and attacked Sharon only because she was a human, but also because they're trying to find a certain mutant that's apparently at this school. Now, for Tom, he does try his best to protect the kids. And really, he is able to kill off one of the members of the acolytes. But then they try to kill him. But at the very last second, the X-Men do arrive to save his life. Now, this leads into a small battle between the X-Men and also the Acolytes. Now, for the Acolytes, this is actually a new version of the group because most of the members of the original group had died back in X-Men issue 1 through 3. Now, really, let's go ahead and jump back to that story arc right there. And the reason why, because in that story arc, we saw Magneto officially go back into being a bad guy for the X-Men, but also he was kind of pushed into this role of leading a new agenda, the idea that mutants should rise up and humans should be killed off. Now, at the end of that story arc, Magneto was killed off by a character known as Fabian Cortez. Now, for Fabian, he used Magneto for martyr, to basically use Magneto as a symbol or a way to push his agenda to get other people involved, to say, hey, listen, they killed off Magneto, and that shows that humans are trying to slow down the mutant race. So let's rise up for Magneto and get rid of the human race. And so after that, you then have Fabian Cortez begin to, recruit new people into the acolytes, but now he is the leader. He wanted that role so bad, he had to get rid of Magneto, really use Magneto to achieve that goal. Either way, we do learn that the new acolytes are actually here for a young child. And the young child they are looking for is actually a mutant. Now, their main goal is to find the child, kidnap the child, and then raise the child with its own kind of people. And of course, I am talking about the mutant race. But the problem is, though, well, when they find the child, they realize the child has Down syndrome. Now, for the acolytes, that's actually a problem. And the reason why, because for people who have Down syndrome, they get looked differently by the human race. But for the acolytes, it's really more of like, hey, this person right here is already genetically wrong. Like, we can't do anything at all with this young child because of him having Down syndrome. And so they tried to leave. Now, while they are trying to leave, you do have the X-Men continue to try to fight against them. But unfortunately, you do have the acolytes being able to get away just this one time. But again, they came here for a child, but they realized that child, who is a mutant, has Down syndrome. And for them, they can't raise a child like that. And really, the ending of this chapter is really important because you then have all these different news channels at the school to report what happened, because the school was blown up, but there were 14 people inside the school, which means they are officially dead. And so this kind of scene right here is now being looked at as a mutant terrorist attack. And so you now have different politicians out there trying to push their agenda of the whole idea that mutants are a problem. And so for Charles Xavier, when he's watching the news, he kind of realized that, yes, that dark future for the mutant race is coming very soon, it seems like, because no matter what they do, things are only getting worse and worse because of evil mutants out there, making things hard for all mutants across the board. But now we have to jump into Uncanny X-Men issue number 299, where we actually pick up with Forge, but also pick up with Henry Gyrich. Now, these two characters, they are currently at what's left of Asteroid M. Now remember, Asteroid M used to be the base for Magneto, and it used to orbit around the Earth. But somehow, in some way, it was able to land safely back onto the Earth, and that should not be even possible. Now, you do have Forge and Henry get called into the actual Asteroid M base. When they get inside, they find the armor of Magneto, but no body of Magneto at all. But they also find the dead bodies of the previous acolytes. And so it kind of shows that somebody was able to make sure that Asteroid M landed safely onto the Earth. But the problem is, now where is the body of Magneto? Because we were left to believe that he had died back in X-Men issue 1 through 3. But now we have to jump over to Charles Xavier and also Jean Grey. Now we do learn the two characters are currently at ABC News Studio. And the reason why, because Charles Xavier is about to go live on TV to do a debate with two other people, because Charles realized that the mutant race and the human race, their relation is beginning to, well, decay very fast. And so his main goal is to rebuild that relation between both races. Now, for me personally, I say humans and mutants have never truly been on the same page, but you do have some humans out there who do care for the mutant race, but not a lot. Now, for this debate, Charles will be joined by two other characters, Senator Kelly and also Grayson Creed. Now, Grayson Creed, he is the leader of the Friends of Humanity group, basically a hate group towards the mutant race. And that group right there will become very important in later events down the road when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. Now, for Kelly, he is more of like, yes, mutants are a problem, but mutants still have rights. And so his main goal is to find a way to handle the mutant problem without actually killing them all off. Now, something else I need to say is that at this time, Marvel Comics, the world has no idea that Charles Xavier is a mutant. Only a select few people actually know that Charles has powers. To them, Charles is a human being who believes in the rights for the mutant race. But now we jump over to Archangel. Now, for Archangel, we're seeing him at an orphanage checking in on the young boy who has Down syndrome from the last chapter. Now, you do have Archangel going out of his way to put the young boy in bed. And once he does that, he is then confronted by, well, a lady who works at the orphanage the young boy is at. And now, for the young lady, she tells Archangel that she feels really appreciated that he's around checking in on the young boy. Now, for Archangel, he's kind of like surprised that she's not scared of him. And she says, why should I be? You're an X-Men. I know that the X-Men are good people. Not all humans out there hate the mutant race. Not all humans out there are scared of the X-Men. Now, for Archangel, he kind of feels like she should be, but also because when she says she looks at the X-Men as angels watching over them, he says, I'm not an angel. I am more like an angel of death. But she says, are you truly a bad angel for the things you have done? Because look at you right now. You knew the young boy right here, the one with Down syndrome, is a mutant. And you could have told police that he was a mutant. And that secret right there could have got out to the public. And then that young boy would have to go through so many different things in his life because he is a mutant. But you and the X-Men held that secret, and now the young boy is able to live a more peaceful life without the idea of worrying that folks might come after him because he is a mutant. Now, I want to jump back over to the debate because you have Charles Xavier trying to win a debate with the idea of using his X-Men. You see, with the whole idea of the world saying that mutants are all bad, that mutants are evil, is Charles saying, well, look over here. You see, we have a group of mutants, the X-Men, who are going out of their way not to only protect mutants, but to also protect the human race. They have saved the world countless times. But then you have Graydon say, but weren't the X-Men responsible for the death of the wife of Senator Kelly? Now you have Kelly step in and say, yes, my wife died technically thanks to the X-Men, but at the same time, they were not fully responsible for her death. At the same time, understand what the X-Men were doing. Is Kelly showing again like, yes, he may have some hatred towards the mutant race and he feels like the mutant race should be properly handled, but at the same time, it's not him saying, let's go ahead and kill off all mutants because they had got my wife killed. No, it's him saying there are good mutants and there are evil mutants, and there's a difference. Like Charles is all down with the idea of protecting mutants. Graydon, he wants to kill off mutants. But Creed, he's right in the middle. And it's kind of like, can one of the other two guys pull Kelly into their actual side? Now, there is another group of characters we have to talk about, and that would be the Upstarts. Now, the Upstarts were a group of people who would play this sick game of killing off mutants. Now, the more powerful the mutant you kill off, the more points you receive. Now, if you have the most points, then you're the top dog in the actual organization. Now, we do learn that Fabian Cortez is in first place. And the reason why, because, well, Fabian killed off Magneto, and that gave him a lot of points. Now, the other members of this group is like Shinobi Shaw, the son to Sebastian Shaw, Game Master. You have Trevor Fitzroy, who is actually from the same future that Bishop is from. And you also have Graydon Creed. Now, we can say that Graydon is only part of this crew because he gets the chance to kill off mutants for the fun of it. But either way, the Upstarts are beginning to come back into the picture to most likely fight against the X-Men. Now, I want to jump back over to the actual debate going on between Kelly, Graydon, and also Charles Xavier, because you have the moderator bring up the fact that Charles Xavier almost died back in the Executioner song. As we all know, it was Strife who was pretending to be Cable who shot Charles Xavier with the techno-organic virus. Now, to the public, all they saw was a random man who pulled a gun out and shot Charles Xavier, and he had to go into recovery. Now, for the moderator, he is saying that look at this video right here. You had somebody who disagreed with you when it came to the idea of mutant rights. Do you realize that you live in a world where you have a bunch of humans who believe the same way that one guy did who tried to kill you? When you're going to realize that technically Charles Xavier, you might have to die as a martyr to kind of push your agenda, the whole idea of humans and mutants living together in harmony. Now, for Charles Xavier, it's really more of like, yes, there was an attempt on my life by somebody who hated mutants. Now, this is Charles kind of just playing along with the moderator because he knows it was actually a mutant pretending to be another mutant. But for Charles, it's kind of like there are still people out there who still want to see mutants actually live alongside with the human race. And the thing is, I'm going to keep pushing my agenda until I actually die. Now, I want to jump over to Colossus. Here's the reason why. Because Colossus has gone through a lot in a very short period of time in our coverage over the X-Men. You see, for Colossus, he found out that his brother that he thought was dead was actually not dead, and he was able to reunite with his brother. Up until you had Mikhail, commit suicide. And then after that, Colossus found out that in Russia, they were basically watching every single mutant across the board, just in case they had to use those mutants for some special reason, like Illyana. You see, Illyana is a mutant, and she is the younger sister to Colossus. Now, for Illyana, she has also gone through a lot when it comes to X-Men comics. You see, she first appeared as a young girl, but then she was taken away into limbo, where she was aged up into a teenager. By the time to the Earth, she was like 13, 14, or 15. But thanks to X-Men Inferno, she was de-aged back down into a young girl again. But then Russia said, hey, we need your sister to use her powers to save the day. The problem was with her powers that they were no longer active because she was a young girl again. And so they had a machine to age her back up to a teenager to hopefully use her to hopefully, unlock her powers once again. Now, for Colossus and the X-Men, they were able to pull Illyana machine before she was aged back up to a teenager. But then recently we find out that Illyana is sick, and we have no idea how sick she truly is. And the thing is, it could be the new virus that could possibly kill her off. Now, I want to jump back over to the debate going on because now you have Beast actually joining in. Now, for Beast, it's really more of him just poking fun at Graydon because you have Graydon try to speak about different things about the mutant race, but you have Beast continue to pick on the man to the point where you have Beast just calling Graydon different names like racist or bigot, but also you have Beast kind of stick his tongue out at Graydon's show that Beast is having a fun time just making fun of Graydon on live television. While you have the debate going on, we jump over to the X-Men who are a nearby bar right now watching the debate. Now, you do have Bishop get easily distracted. And the reason why, because he sees a waitress and he realizes that there's something very special about her. Maybe she could be a family member, like a great-grandmother or a grandmother or a cousin down the road. Who knows? Either way, there is some kind of connection between her and Bishop. Now, with that being said, you then have Storm give a toast. Now, really, it's not a toast. It's really more of like raising a glass to all the different people who had helped out the mutant race over the years and who are now technically dead. So, for example, Mimic, Thunderbird, Cypher, Cable, Warlock. Those are different characters who had helped out the mutant race over the years. Now, for the X-Men, they have no idea that technically Cable is alive again. But Storm continues on by saying there were humans out there who also supported the mutant race, like Mariko Yoshida, the ex-girlfriend to Wolverine, Sharon Freilander, who died in the last chapter. And really for Storm, she does not stop there because she even says the bad mutants out there who had caused problems for us, they could have done good, but also they're gone as well, like the Hellions and also Magneto. But it's her saying, we're hoping that maybe down the road there is a bright future for all mutants. And so she raised her glass in the air to say, to the future. Now, the ending of this chapter is really important because you did have Charles Xavier and Senator Kelly continue to talk to one another after the debate had ended. Now, while they're talking, kind of shows that these two characters could possibly work together and to sit down one day and discuss how they truly feel about the mutant race and possibly could be on the same side with one another. Now, you have Jean Grey realize that maybe Senator Kelly is not really a bad guy, but then somebody was able to enter her mind and tell her, like, yes, you're right. Senator Kelly is not a bad guy. Matter of fact, he could be a good guy. And so you didn't have Jean Grey realize that the assistant who's following Senator Kelly around could most likely be a mutant. And that is really important. Now, for Jean Grey, she also overheard Charles tell Kelly that he's going to France, and she has no idea why for. And then you have Cyclops appear. He said, listen, the reason why we're going to France is because we had found the base of the new acolytes. Apparently, it's in France. And so the gold team and the blue team are going to work together, and we're going to fly over to France to find a base of the new acolytes. And so as we dive into Uncanny X-Men issue number 300, we actually pick up with Nightcrawler. Now, this is not Nightcrawler rejoining the X-Men. It's really more of Nightcrawler just helping the X-Men out because their next mission is going to be in France. And for Nightcrawler, he's still the leader for Excalibur. And Excalibur is based out of Great Britain. And so he was nearby. Now, once you have Nightcrawler arrive, he sees Forge there. Now, the reason why Forge is there because, well, this area of France is being labeled as the dead zone, meaning that Cerebro is unable to detect any mutants at all in this dead zone area. Now, the reason why, because the acolytes have put up some new tech to block out Cerebro. And so Forge came here to give the X-Men some upgrades for Cerebro to help them be able to locate the actual base of the acolytes. Now, for Nightcrawler, he realized that Forge is trying to leave before the X-Men had arrived. And for Forge, he says, listen, I don't want to be here with the X-Men for one reason, because you guys live in an imaginary world, because you all believe in a world coming down the road where mutants and humans are going to be able to live together in peace. And for me, I'm going to tell you right now, it's not going to happen because that's make-believe. This is the real world. We are mutants, they hate us, and they're always going to try to kill us. And so you have Forge leave just like that. Now, for the X-Men, they're on their way to meet up with Nightcrawler, but they had to make a quick stop to pick up Moira Taggart at one of her estates. The problem is, though, when they do arrive at her estate, they don't find her. Matter of fact, they find the building on fire. Now, for Wolverine, he's able to realize that Moira Taggart was never in the building, but most likely she was taken. Now, before you have the X-Men being able to do some detective work, that is when they are stopped by a mob of people who live in this area. And the last time the X-Men were there, they had caused a lot of damage to this area. And so for this mob of people, they're kind of like, hey, we don't want your kind here anymore. Like, leave right now because you guys have caused a lot of problems for us in the past and we hate you guys a lot. Now, for the X-Men, they hate the idea of seeing all this hatred pointed towards them. But for Charles Xavier, it's more of like, no, we have to understand what these people feel like because we did cause a lot of problems in the past for them. But either way, let's go ahead and move on with our day. Now, we do get a small flashback between Charles Xavier and Moira Taggart to kind of remind us that those two characters, they go way back with one another. But we also kind of pick up at the moment where you have Charles telling Moira Taggart about his idea of the X-Men, how he already selected different people to form the first class. Now, we already know the first class was Cyclops, Jean Grey, Angel, Iceman, and Beast. But we also learned that he also was thinking about adding Storm, Nightcrawler, and Colossus to that first class. The problem was, though, they were international characters, so it was kind of hard to bring those three over into America to be part of the first class. And so now we're being told that Storm should have been there alongside with the other heroes at the very beginning. Same for Nightcrawler, same for Colossus, and possibly other people as well. But then we learned the actual flashback was being watched through a computer screen by the acolytes. You see, the acolytes were the ones who had kidnapped Moira Taggart, and they had put Moira inside a machine so they were able to dig in her mind to hopefully learn more about Magneto. Now, we do see that Fabian Cortez, the guy who had killed off Magneto in the past, is still the leader of the new acolytes. They have no idea that he was the one who had killed off Magneto. Now, for Fabian Cortez, he is constantly arguing with another character known as Amalia Voigt. Now, Amalia Voigt is going to be really important in later chapters down the road. And the reason why, because her close ties with Charles Xavier. They were very close once before in the long time past. Either way, for Amalia, she hates the idea that Moira Taggart is even a prisoner. You see, because at this time in Marvel Comics, Moira Taggart was just a regular human, not a mutant. And so for Amalia, it's kind of like, go ahead and kill her off because she is a human. Why do we have her around? But for Fabian, it's kind of like, no, I need her around so I am able to learn more about Magneto. Now, while you have the X-Men on their way to meet with Nightcrawler, you have Colossus call up Stevie Hunter. Now, Stevie Hunter was another teacher who used to work at a school of Charles Xavier. Really, she joined right after Kitty Pryde had joined the X-Men. Now, for Stevie, she stayed behind to watch over Illyana. And like we saw in the previous chapter, it does look like that Illyana might have some kind of sickness, that new kind of virus. And so you have Stevie telling Colossus that she's not getting better. Now you have Iceman trying to talk to Colossus to say he understands what he's going through. But for Colossus, no one truly understands what he is going through because this man had already lost 3 different family members, his parents and also his brother. And so now he might lose his sister as well. But either way, you do have the X-Men being able to meet up with Nightcrawler finally. But back inside the base of the Acolytes, we actually pick up with Fabian Cortez and also Amalia still having their argument, but you didn't have Moira Taggart pull Fabian close to her and say, listen, we both know what happened to Magneto. You see, to the entire public, they believe that Magneto had died in a way of trying to inspire the mutant race to fight on against the human race. But in reality, he's going to force to die because of Fabian Cortez. And so for Moira, she said, how would your new acolytes feel if they find out that you had killed off their god, that you're the reason why Magneto is no longer around? Now, you do have Fabian and Amalia leave, but another acolyte, better known as Simon Hall, was nearby. And so once you have Fabian and Amalia leave, you have Moira Taggart being able to talk to Simon and say, listen, you are following a false leader. He wants you to believe that you guys are trying to carry on Magneto's dream. But in reality, he's the reason why Magneto is no longer around. Now, for Simon, he really cannot believe what Moira Taggart is saying because, one, she's a human, but two, because she's a prisoner. But now for Simon, that doubt has been planted inside his mind. He's now beginning to believe in the possibility that Fabian might be a false leader. But now we have to jump over to Archangel and Bishop. Now, these two characters, they're trying their best to figure out where is the actual base of the Acolytes. And you have Bishop see a castle. And so for Bishop, it's kind of like, I got a weird feeling that castle could most likely be the base of the Acolytes. And so you have Archangel and Bishop head over to that castle to kind of look around and see if the Acolytes are hiding inside. But getting back inside the actual castle, we do pick up with Fabian Cortez calling on the Game Master. Now, the Game Master is part of the Upstart program alongside with Fabian Cortez. Now, for the Game Master, he is a very powerful psychic, so you are easily able to contact him across the world. And so for Fabian, you do have him and also the Game Master get into a small argument. Now, their argument is not really important, and the reason why, because you have Fabian Cortez actually admit that he was the one who killed off Magneto. And so with him saying that, he had no idea that Simon was in the room. And so now Simon realized that he was following a false leader. Now you have Simon trying his best to get away, but when it comes to Fabian Cortez, he's able to give your powers an upgrade for a short moment of time. And so he kind of gave Simon Powers too much juice to the point where you actually have Simon fly straight out the castle into a nearby area. But now Simon got away from Fabian for the time being. But now he knows the actual truth, that Fabian was the one who killed off Magneto. Now we jump over to the X-Men real briefly because you see the X-Men getting ready to actually go inside the castle. They truly believe that what Bishop said could be true, that this could be the actual base of the acolytes. Now, for the X-Men though, you have Charles say, listen guys, I use Cerebro and there is a mutant that's not in Cerebro's files. But yes, there are a bunch of mutants there. And so that tells the X-Men like, hey, we need to go inside right now at this exact moment. Now, for Simon, we do see that he is alive, but he's also found by a young woman who is actually trying to help him out. And even though he looks at her as a regular human, he realized that not all humans are truly evil and deserve to die. But the problem is she is killed off from behind by other members of the acolytes. So they're trying to kill him now after just killing her off. Now, luckily for Simon, he is then saved the very last second by the X-Men. Now, this battle is very short-lived when it comes to the X-Men arriving just in time to help out Simon because they take down these members of the Acolytes so easily. But after doing that, you did have Charles Xavier being able to actually talk to Simon and say, listen, man, I think that you should try to help us out because, yes, what you are doing is completely wrong. Like, I understand you want to make the world a better place for mutants, but I believe that my dream is the better idea for the world. The idea of humans and mutants living together. And because you had a brief moment where you saw a human actually trying to help you out, I now know that you understand that all humans are truly evil. And so now Simon is going to help out the X-Men get inside the castle to take down the acolytes. And this leads into a big battle between the X-Men and also the acolytes. Now, I could really sit down and try to explain what's happening in every single battle here in this section, but I really want to focus more on Iceman. And the reason why, because you have Iceman show us that he had learned from what Mikkel had told him in an earlier story arc. You see, in an earlier story arc, Colossus' brother Mikkel told Iceman that he could be a powerful mutant if he had just tried to study more when it comes to his powers and not try to find love. It's him saying like, Iceman, you can be one of the most powerful mutants in the world if you use your brains to learn more about your powers rather than trying to hit on girls. And so is Iceman right now showing us that he has learned some new moves thanks to Mikkel showing that he can do more when it comes to his ice abilities. Now, you do have the X-Men being able to take down the acolytes, but then you have Cyclops realize that Bishop and Fabian Cortez are both missing. Now, for Charles, we get the idea right here that there's a long history between him and Amalia Voigt because he does go talk to her. And before she leaves, she does express that she's still mad at Charles Xavier, but she's also still mad about the idea that she lost her entire family thanks to humans. Now, she also tells us that she was also there with Charles alongside with Magneto in the early days of their lives. But then she teleports away. But now we have to jump over to Bishop fighting against Fabian Cortez. Now, Fabian tried to sneak away in the middle of the battle. And so you have Bishop say, you know what? There's no way I'm going to allow you to just sneak away. And so you have Bishop being able to catch up to Fabian Cortez. And you did have the two characters actually battle against one another. Now, while they're fighting against one another, it gets to the point where you have Fabian begin to overdrive the power of Bishop, because when it comes to Fabian, like I said earlier, he has the ability to overdrive your powers, to give you a power boost. But if he gives you too much, then your body might not be able to actually handle it. And so for Bishop, we do see him having a hard time handling what Fabian is doing to him. And so by the end of the battle, you do have the X-Men arrive. You have Simon being able to distract Fabian long enough to allow Wolverine to actually take out Fabian Cortez. Now, we're left to believe that Fabian's dead, but he is not. But you did have Simon say, listen, I am not going to join your cause at all. And so you have Simon leave, but you have the X-Men being able to take Fabian with them back to the X Mansion. Now, there is an epilogue for this actual story arc where the first part is that we do see that Fabian Cortez actually did survive Wolverine's attack and was being kept at a nearby hospital, but then being saved by Amalia. Now, you then have Fabian be contacted by the Game Master, where you have the Game Master tell Fabian that he had lost all his points when it comes to the Upstart organization. Now remember, he got a lot of points because he killed off Magneto, but now Fabian realized the only reason why he may have lost all his points is because Magneto is not dead. Magneto is alive and coming back very soon for round 2 with the X-Men. But to wrap up today's video, we do jump over to Charles Xavier and also Moorman Taggart. Now, you have these two characters looking over a sample of, well, the new virus that is going around killing off mutants left and right. Now, for Charles and also Moorman Taggart, they tell us that most likely if somebody is affected by this virus, they are going to be killed off. They are going to die. Now, for Charles, he knows that this virus may have came from no other than Strife. And so now he knows that Strife had released a virus into the mutant race population. And so sooner or later, all mutants are going to be affected by this actual virus. Now, Moorman Taggart says that she does remember a group of mutants back on her island that she was trying to help out. And she realized they all died from this actual virus. And so we jump over to Colossus, and let's not forget that Illyana is actually sick. And so we're left to believe in the possibility that she is going to die. What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men, but now we have to jump back over to, well, Uncanny X-Men as we continue our coverage leading into Fatal Attractions, the next crossover that we are going to talk about very soon on my channel. But first, we got to jump back over to Uncanny X-Men and cover another story arc that leads into that actual crossover. Now, this is a two-part story arc that takes place in Uncanny X-Men issue number 301 and 302. Now, with this two-part story arc, it's all about the idea of our heroes once again being attacked by the Upstart organization. Now, this is a group of characters that we had officially talked about before. You see, this is a group of characters who are just trying to kill off other people for their own kind of sick enjoyment. And I'll give you guys a quick reminder who they are as we go through today's video. So getting into the opening pages of Uncanny X-Men issue number 301, we actually pick up with Selene being tortured by Fitzroy. Now, Selene is a character where we haven't truly learned much about her just yet. And really, in the late 1990s, when you have Marvel really trying their best to begin telling us her actual origin story, leading into the 2000s where she did become more popular, but also used more for different story arcs. But right now, she's being tortured by another character, and that would be Fitzroy. Now, Fitzroy is also a mutant, but he comes from the future, Bishop future. And just like Bishop, Bishop, he is currently stuck in the past right now at the moment, but he also had joined the Upstart organization. Now, the Upstart organization is a group of mutants who go out of their way to kill other people. Most of the time, they're killing off mutants as a way to receive points for their killings. And the person who has the most points become the actual leader of the entire organization. Well, sorry, actually second in charge of the entire organization after Game Master, the true ruler of the entire group. Now, when it comes to Fitzroy, he's right now trying to regain his position as the leader of the Upstart organization by using Selene to kill her off, to get those points to get him back on top. But before he does kill her off, he wants to have a meeting with all the members of, well, the Upstart organization. And so he needs the attention of Game Master. And Game Master is an omnipath. His mind is connected to all minds across the world. He feels almost what every single person on Earth is currently feeling. And so for Selene right now, feeling pain thanks to Fitzroy's machine, he knows that sooner or later it should get the attention of Game Master. And it does. And so you have Game Master being able to take the mind of Fitzroy over somewhere else to have an actual conversation with the other members of the Upstart organization. Now, we had officially talked about each member of the Upstart organization. Like, for example, we have Fitzroy, the guy from Bishop's future. We also have Shinobi Shaw, the son to Sebastian Shaw. Also, he is the reason why Sebastian's dead right now, because Shinobi killed his dad off to receive a lot of points. And currently, Shinobi is the actual leader of the Upstart organization. He has the most points. You have Illyana Blaze, and we met her back in X-Men Unlimited issue #1. Now, for Illyana Blaze, she has 0 points. We have Fabian Cortez, and then lastly, we have Graydon Creed. Now, Graydon Creed is technically, I wanted the newest character right now for us because Graydon Creed is the leader of the Friends of Humanity. He's just a regular human who loves the idea of killing off mutants. And that is why he had actually joined this group right here to get part in the game of killing off mutants. Now, the reason why we're having this meeting right now is to basically find out who is their next target. If they are able to kill off their next target, that person will receive a lot of points and also have the possibility of becoming the next leader of the Upstart organization. So, for example, that will be Forge. Forge is the next target. If they kill him off, then they have the possibility of getting a lot of points and becoming the next leader of the group. Now, I want to jump over to the school of Charles Xavier. And the reason why, because I want to talk more about the actual virus that has been going around killing off mutants when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. You see, we had learned that Stripe had released some kind of virus out into the world, and that virus is going around killing off different mutants around the world. Now, not everyone knows about the virus just yet. So, like, for example, only Cyclops, Mr. Sinister, Charles Xavier, Moira Taggart, and maybe a handful of other characters. But the thing is, every single person that gets this virus, they die in a matter of a few days. And right now, Colossus' little sister, she has the virus. Magic currently has the virus, and she is going to die here in a few days. Now, for Colossus, he has no idea that his sister has the virus. He still believes it's some kind of weird sickness that his sister has. Charles Xavier and Moira Taggart has not informed the man about what kind of virus she has. Now, this is also the book that tells us called the Legacy Virus. And this is the big name when it comes to X-Men comics, because this virus will go around and begin to kill off mutants at a very fast rate. But either way, it's Charles saying, we cannot tell Colossus anything at all because this man has already gone through a lot. He lost his brother to suicide. His parents were killed off thanks to the government of Russia. Right now, all he has left is his sister. If you tell that man that right now his sister is going to die, he is going to fall apart. And so they don't tell him anything about Illyana and the virus she has. Now, I want to jump over to Forge, and here's the reason why. Because you had Forge leave the X-Men a while back. Now, the reason why he left the X-Men is because, well, he realized that Charles Xavier's dream is not really reachable. The whole idea of the possibility of humans and mutants being able to live together in harmony, it just can't happen. Because humans will always find a way to hate mutants, and possibly mutants will always find a way to hate on humans. You have two parties who are not really able to work together to live in harmony. Now, with all that being said, Forge left the X-Men, but when he did leave, he also took Mystique with him. Now, the reason why, because over the years, with Mystique powers, she had pretended to be a lot of different people, and that did a huge number to her mind. And so her mind was officially broken. And so Forge realized that he was technically the only one who could possibly help her and heal her mind back together so that she'll be good old Mystique once again. Now, I want to jump over to Bishop and Forge, and here's the reason why, because you have those two characters right now on their way over to, well, Dallas, Texas, to meet up with Forge. Now, this is huge for two different reasons. The first is that, well, this will be the first time you have Storm and Forge having a conversation after their breakup. And that's pretty huge, but also because Charles realized that he has a lot of Shi'ar technology. That technology could possibly be used to find a way to get a cure for this virus. But the problem is the tech right now is not doing good enough to actually find a cure. So why not bring Forge in? A guy who is great with machines could possibly upgrade the machines to the point where they might be able to actually find a cure for the virus and it saved the life of Colossus' little sister. Now, like I said a while back, Forge is now the next target for the Upstart organization. So right now, their main goal is to go after him, to basically kill him off. And so right now, you have Forge just trying to help Mystique out through helping healing her mind, but then out of nowhere, he is attacked by Fitzroy. Now, this makes for a cool battle. And the reason why, because Fitzroy is right now using future technology as a way to bring down Forge. But at the same time, when it comes to Forge, with his mutant ability, he is able to create tech that's so far advanced that it could actually rival against the tech that Fitzroy is actually using. But either way, right now for Forge, he has two goals right now: to protect Mystique, but to also take down Fitzroy as well. But now we have to jump over to Bobby Drake, aka Iceman. Now, this is the point where you basically have Iceman about to end his relationship with Opal. And really, it's not him trying to end it. It's really more of her. But before she's able to have that conversation with him, he is called away for what is happening right now in Dallas with the whole idea of Fitzroy trying to attack Forge. And so him and Archangel and the rest of Gold Team gotta go to help out Storm Bishop with that situation. Getting back over to Texas, we actually pick up with Forge just trying his best to fight against Fitzroy. Now, Fitzroy is actually giving Forge a challenge, but Forge is able to actually hold his own for the time being. It really shows that no matter how high tech that Fitzroy tech truly is, that Forge tech can actually challenge his actual tech. Either way, you do have the two characters go back and forth in their battle, but then you have Bishop appear. And when Bishop does appear, you have Fitzroy get very upset because it really shows that he still blames Bishop about the fact that right now both characters are technically stuck in the past. But either way, you do have Fitzroy try to attack Bishop. But at the ending of this chapter, we actually find out that that was not Bishop at all. That in reality, it was actually, well, Mystique pretending to be Bishop. Now, unfortunately for Mystique, she does get seriously injured by the attack by Fitzroy. Now, for Storm, she's trying her best to get to Forge and also Mystique. But that is when the entire tower of Forge just blows up. And so we're kind of left to wonder in the possibility, did Forge, Mystique, and also Fitzroy possibly been killed off in some kind of explosion? So as we dive into Uncanny X-Men issue number 302, we actually pick up with Storm trying to use her powers to protect the innocent people who could most likely be affected by the debris thanks to the explosion of the tower that belonged to Forge. Now, while trying to use her powers to protect these innocent people, of course, you have some people there who truly hate mutants. And so when they see Storm, they're kind of like, look, here is another mutant trying to use their powers to kill us, not realizing that right now she's trying to use her powers as a way to protect their lives. But right now, Storm has no choice but to go ahead and block out the hatred and continue to focus on trying to protect them from being killed off. Now, for Bishop, while you have Storm trying to use her powers as a way to protect all the innocent people in Dallas who were nearby the tower, you have Bishop just going ahead into the tower to hopefully find Mystique and Forge. Now, for Bishop, he truly believes that Forge and Mystique are most likely dead because to him, there's no way they would be able to actually survive that kind of explosion. But hey, he's trying his best to hold on to some kind of hope for them. But now we have to jump over to the school of Charles Xavier for a brief moment. And the reason why, because we actually pick up with Illyana calling out for her brother. But the problem is right now, the entire X-Men Gold team is away in Dallas on that certain mission. It's just her and Charles Xavier. And so you have Charles actually using his powers as a way to ease her mind, to pretend to be Colossus, as she calls out for her brother. Honestly, I don't really like this moment, but like, hey, you know what? Let's go ahead and move on. Now, again, for a brief moment, we jump back over to Storm, still trying to use her powers as a way to protect all the innocent people nearby the tower from being killed off by debris. But while she's trying to do that, she's being attacked by a group of people who truly do hate mutants. But then out of nowhere, a young blonde police officer appears out of nowhere to protect her by saying, listen, I understand what she's doing. I'm not somebody who's full of hatred like you guys are. And so he's able to actually hold his own while Storm continues to use her powers to save the lives of all the innocent people in that area. Now, getting back over to Bishop, you have Bishop just trying his best to hopefully find Forge and also Mystique. Now, after a good few moments of trying to break through some kind of barrier, he does find Forge. Now, at first, he believed that Forge was an enemy. Then he realized, nope, it's not an enemy, it's Forge. Everything is all cool. And also, Mystique is still alive, but just barely. But either way, at least Bishop was able to actually find them. Now, we jump back over to Storm, and the only reason why, because you have Storm still being talked down to by the group of people who truly do hate Storm for being a mutant. But luckily for her, the rest of the X-Men team arrive, like for example, Iceman. And so you have Storm and Iceman being able to use their powers as a way to protect the innocent people in that area. Now, I kind of want to go ahead and jump back over to Bishop as a way to kind of begin to wind down this actual story, because when we do, you have Bishop and Forge and also Mystique trying to get somewhere safe. But then they're confronted by Fitzroy. Now, you do have our heroes trying their best to fight against him, but the problem is in mid-battle, it does look like our heroes might lose to Fitzroy. Now, luckily for Bishop, Forge, and Mystique, the rest of the X-Men Gold team do arrive. So like Archangel, Jean Grey, and also Colossus. But this leads into a huge moment for Colossus. Because like I said earlier, when it comes to Colossus, the man has gone through a lot in a very short period of time. The whole idea that he had lost his brother thanks to suicide. He had lost his parents thanks to the Russian government. This man has gone through a lot in a very short period of time. And so because of that, you have Colossus just fed up with the whole idea of being an X-Men for so long, but not actually seeing any kind of improvement around the world with him being an X-Men and fighting alongside other X-Men members. The only thing he has seen is the world getting worse and worse by the moment. And so he's just fed up, especially with the idea that Fitzroy is another mutant from the future who came here to the past to cause more pain to innocent people. And so for Colossus, he wants to go ahead and kill off Fitzroy. But you have Archangel and Bishop and Iceman being able to actually calm him down. Like, hey man, listen, you don't want to do that at all. Like, you gotta understand, you are not a killer. If you kill him, you'll be just like him. But for Colossus, it's kind of like, what's the point though? Because this world is not getting better. This world is continuing to get worse and worse. Now, the ending of this book, we actually jump back over to Jubilee, who's at the X Mansion. Now, while being at home, she hears the doorbell ring. And when she runs to the door to answer it, well, she sees Kitty Pryde. Now, if you saw our Excalibur videos, you would know that Kitty Pryde had walked away from the team while most of the team was away in space. They had no idea that Kitty Pryde had officially left the team to go back home to the X Mansion. Now, the reason why she is there because Colossus had called her and told her what was happening to Illyana. And so that is why she's back here right now, to see her old childhood friend. What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we are going to continue our coverage over the X-Men, but now we are going to cover some X-Men Unlimited. Now, X-Men Unlimited was actually a completely different thing when it came to the other X titles. And let me explain. You see, in the 1990s, for Marvel, DC, really all comics, your books were usually monthly release books, meaning one book per month. And occasionally you'll have books released bi-weekly, so 2 books per month. When it came to X-Men Unlimited, it was a tad bit different. You see, you would get one book every single 3 months, so 4 books per year. And the reason why? To test out new artists and new writers when it came to them entering the scene of comics, to see if fans would actually like your writing or like your skills as a artist. And if Marvel and the fans like your work, then guess what? Your work will be used again down the road in other books and Marvel comics. And so for X-Men Unlimited, it was all like that, as a way to test out new writers and new artists to see if fans and Marvel could possibly like your work. Now, something else I do want to mention is that when it came to X-Men Unlimited, you were able to get at least one complete story in every single issue. Now, things did change when it came to the Onslaught Saga and the Onslaught Saga. 2 of these books in this series were actually used as tie-ins, but the other books besides those 2 books mostly were giving you a complete story in one single issue. Now, the first issue for X-Men Unlimited was actually used to focus more on the actual leaders of the X-Men. So Cyclops, Storm, and also Charles Xavier. Now, as we all know, for Charles Xavier, he's the main boss of the X-Men in the 1990s. But then for Cyclops and Storm, it was more because they were the leaders of the 2 different teams that he had going on at that time. And so this book right here really shows why these 3 characters are the actual leaders of the X-Men, to show off their leadership skills in one single book. Now, currently for our heroes, they're trying their best to just survive the weather of Antarctica. And the reason why, because they were trying to leave the Savage Land, but something happened to the Blackbird. Now, the Blackbird is the jet they use to travel across the world, but something or someone had attacked the Blackbird and made them crash in Antarctica. Now remember, the Savage Land is more like a jungle area in the middle of Antarctica where the weather is perfect. You have dinosaurs there. You have different tribes of different people in the actual area of the Savage Land. But around the Savage Land is Antarctica. And so our heroes left that natural, beautiful weather and then jumped into some harsh weather. And that was when the Blackbird was attacked. And so as we dive into today's issue, we're just seeing our heroes being able to regroup, but just barely. Like right now, Storm is freaking out. And the reason why, because she can tell there's something wrong with the actual weather. With her connection to the Earth weather, she can tell something is off in this area. It really does bother her a lot. And for Cyclops, he's having a hard time right now controlling his optic beam. And the reason why, he lost his visor. So if he does open his eyes up, bam, that optic beam is going everywhere. And so currently you have Charles Xavier being his eyes by being able to connect his mind to Scott's mind and say, hey, Scott, use my vision as a way to walk around the area to figure out what exactly happened, but to also find Storm as well, which he was able to do. Now, that is the moment where we are being introduced to a new character known as Sienna Blaze. I want to say it's Sienna, but I also heard be pronounced as Sienna, but I'm calling her Sienna Blaze. Now, for Sienna Blaze, this is not actually her first appearance. She first appeared back in the Strike Files issue number 1, but her actual full appearance was back in Uncanny X-Men issue number 301. But technically, this book right here takes place before that issue. And so even though her first appearance is in the next one we're going to cover in our next video, this story right here takes place before that one. It's a tad bit confusing, but for Sienna Blaze, she has the ability to absorb the Earth's electromagnetic energy. And when she does, she's then able to take that energy and use it as a destructive blast towards her targets. And so for Sienna Blaze, when she does that, she also has the ability to damage the electromagnetic field in that area around her. Now, if she does use her powers constantly over and over again, she could also destroy the Earth's ecosystem. Now, we currently see her with a group of scientists where apparently they were trying to see how powerful she truly is. But at the same time, she was also trying to use her powers as a way to kill off the leaders of the X-Men. And the reason why? Because she's part of the Upstart program. You see, we had actually talked about the Upstart program in our other videos in our coverage over the X-Men. The Upstart program is really more of a group of characters playing this sick game of going after other people. And once they're actually able to go after other people, they kill them off to receive points. And if you have the most points, you become the actual leader of the group. And here's a big thing right now. You see, if you kill off more powerful characters, you'll receive more points than usual. And so for Sienna, her goal was to kill off Charles, Scott, and also Storm because they're powerful characters, but also because they're leaders of the X-Men. If you kill them off, you get a lot of points in the actual organization, and you quickly will move up to the top. Now for her, she does find out that she did not kill off her targets thanks to the character known as Game Master. Now, Game Master is a character we also talked about before in our earlier coverage over the X-Men. For Game Master, he has the ability of being an omnipath, meaning that his mind is connected to all minds across the world. And so with that kind of power, he was able to tell Sienna like, hey, listen, you did not kill off any of them. All 3 characters have survived the actual crash. Now for Sienna, that is a problem because she only came here to kill them off, but to also get her powers tested. Now, even though it is technically her fault that she was not able to kill off the 3 leaders of the X-Men, she also blames the scientists as well. And so because she does, she kills them off just like that. Now, for Game Master, he tells her like, the more often you use your powers, the more damage you do to the actual ecosystem, but also the weather in this area as well. And really, that's going to be very important for the later parts of this video. But now we have to jump over to Bishop and also Psylocke. Now, these 2 characters, they are currently back at the X-Mansion, but they were in contact with Storm, Cyclops, and Charles Xavier before the actual accident. And so for Bishop and also Psylocke, they're getting very concerned because they lost connection to their friends, but at the same time, though, they kind of realize that they're kind of stuck somewhere in the middle of Antarctica. And that weather right there is pretty harsh for at least 2 members of the actual team. Now, getting back over to our team, they kind of want to sit down and go back over everything that happened to them when it came to the Blackbird actually crashing. Now, thanks to Charles Xavier and being able to connect the minds of Storm, Cyclops, and also his mind as well, they are able to kind of replay what exactly went down when it came to the Blackbird crashing in the middle of Antarctica. And so we do get a quick review of what they were doing in the Savage Land. You see, for our heroes, they actually stopped by the Savage Land to pay a visit over to Kazar. And the reason why, because Kazar had a huge amount of vibranium, and apparently he was going to give the vibranium over to the X-Men, which he did. Then on their way home for the X-Men, they were hit by some kind of blast. Now, we already know where that blast came from, Sienna Blaze. But for our heroes, they had no idea where that power came from. All they knew that out of nowhere, they were hit and they were going down pretty fast. And so the next few pages are really more of Cyclops and Storm working together to save their lives. Because how big the Blackbird truly is, it was too much for Storm to try to use her powers as a way to bring the Blackbird down safely. And so Cyclops had to use his powers to cut the Blackbird in half so that they'll be able to land somewhat easier than the original plan was going to be. But either way, by the end of the section, we lead back up into the present moment where you have Cyclops, Storm, and also Charles Xavier trying their best to figure out what is going to be their next move. Now, this actually leads us into us learning a tad bit more about the character of Storm. Let me explain. You see, over the years in Marvel Comics, Storm was one of those popular X-Men characters, and Chris Claremont and other writers did a great job of giving us some details about the actual character's past, but also her powers. And so this book right here is really more about, hey, let's learn a tad bit more about the powers of Storm. Now, as we all know, she has the ability to manipulate the weather around her. But it's also the book saying that she's able to see Mother Nature around her. That is her connection to the weather on the earth. She sees different kinds of patterns around her because of her connection to Mother Nature. But the problem is right now, what she is seeing is a hot mess. It's all these different kinds of colors. And the reason why? Because of Sienna Blaze. Her powers had messed up the ecosystem of the earth. And so unfortunately for Storm, what she's seeing right now is just a bunch of different colors. And so when she's trying to use her powers to control the weather around her, Cyclops and Charles Xavier, she truly can't. She actually struggles to the point where she begins to fall out of the sky. Now for Cyclops, he's able to use his powers to kind of burn the snow around him to make a soft cushion for her to actually land in so that she would not land as a flat pancake. Now, we do continue on learning more about the actual powers of Storm here, and let me explain. You see, for Cyclops, he truly believed that when it came to the powers of Storm, he believed that she was unaffected by all the different kinds of weathers around the world. So, for example, if they were somewhere in an extremely hot area, for Storm, she'll be perfectly okay, but everybody else on her team would be affected by the actual hot weather in that area. But you have Charles say, "Are you stupid?" Like, no, that is not how her powers work. You see, for Storm, how her powers work is that if she's in a hot area, her body goes cold. But if her body's in a cold area, her body heats up. It's a way to make sure that she's able to survive in different kinds of weather. And so right now you have Storm's body just overheating. And so you have Charles being able to use his mind to have his mind tell her mind to calm her body down, to make sure she does stay at a nice hot temperature, but not at the point where she's overheating at all. Now, I want to jump back over to Bishop and also Psylocke. And the reason why, because those two characters, they are currently in another Blackbird. And their main goal is to hopefully save the life of Charles Xavier, Storm, and also Cyclops. But the problem is the area they're in right now, the weather is so wild that unfortunately the Blackbird our other two heroes have brought with them is not going to survive at all in that area. And so unfortunately, All they can do right now is just wait it out. And hopefully the weather will get better so that they're able to actually fly in. If not, there is a huge possibility that Storm, Charles, and Cyclops might officially die. Now we do get this very good bonding moment between Storm and also Cyclops. What I'm saying is that you have Storm still recovering after Charles Xavier had to tell her body to somewhat cool down, but also stay warm so that she'll be able to actually survive in this kind of weather. But while she's trying to recover, she begins to think about Forge. Now, if you saw our earlier coverage over the X-Men, by this point, her and Forge, they broke up. Forge left the X-Mansion with Mystique, and really, we still have no idea what exactly he's doing with her. All we know is that he's trying to help her fix her actual problem, because for Mystique, her mind was broken. And the reason why, because she had transformed to other people so many times that her mind had so many different personas in her mind all at once that her mind is officially broken. And so it's Forge right now trying to fix her mind. But either way, for Storm, the reason why she brings up Forge, because she loved him and she wanted to marry him. And she was going to leave the X-Men to be with him. But unfortunately, Forge left. And so you have Storm ask Cyclops, do you know, or do you think he knows that I love him? And Cyclops says, yes, he does know. Now, for both Cyclops and Storm, they both realize that Charles Xavier is gone, that he had decided to go off on his own for his own kind of mission to hopefully save the lives of all three of them. Now, for Charles Xavier, we do learn that he had apparently picked up a psychic imprint of somebody living in a nearby tower. And so for Charles Xavier, he truly believes the person who's kind of leaving out the trail for him to follow could possibly help him save the lives of him and the two X-Men that he cares so much for. But the problem is, when his vehicle gets close enough to the actual area, it runs out of fuel. And so unfortunately, he now has to crawl the rest of the way over to the actual tower. Now, for Cyclops and Storm, they're trying their best to catch up to Charles Xavier. But the problem is, well, unfortunately, they can't find him. And so while you have our two characters just trying their best to locate their professor, they believe they finally found him. Except they find somebody else. They find Illyana Blaze. Now, for Illyana Blaze, this is perfect because now she'll have the chance to actually kill at least 2 of the 3 members of the X-Men. And really, she gives Storm and Cyclops a run for their money. But let's not forget that these two characters, they're technically weakened because earlier they had to deal with a whole crash situation. But our two heroes, they're trying their best, but unfortunately, they lose the battle easily to Illyana Blaze. Now, for a brief moment, it does look like that she might be able to kill off Cyclops. But in reality, you did have Charles Xavier being able to use his powers as a way to trick the mind of Illyana Blaze. So for Illyana, she believes that she had killed off Cyclops, that she had killed off Storm. But in reality, they are perfectly okay. Now, this is where I get a tad bit confused because you have Illyana Blaze try to use her powers once again on our 3 heroes. But it does not work. Now, for Illyana, she believes that Charles Xavier was able to access her mind and tell her mind to not actually activate her powers. But you have Charles tell us that in reality, he told her powers to not actually activate, which for me is kind of like, isn't it the same thing? Like you told her mind to not use her powers, but now you're saying you told her powers not activate. Like you still have to tell her mind to tell her mind to not do something. Either way, for Charles Xavier, he told her powers to do the complete opposite. Instead of her trying to release a huge blast at our heroes, instead, her body is trying to absorb a huge amount of electromagnetic energy. Now, once she does absorb a lot, she does tell our heroes that if she does release this energy, they are going to die. Now, for Cyclops and Storm, they were able to bury a bunch of snow on her to kind of bring down the actual blast radius of her powers. Now, she is almost completely drained, but this is the moment where we learned that Sienna Blaze has the ability to actually teleport. Now, for her to teleport, she has to ride the electromagnetic energy around the world, meaning that she's able to turn herself into energy to give her the ability to actually ride that energy across the world to teleport somewhere else. But here comes the big problem, though. You see, with her, we already learned when she does use her powers, she causes a huge vacuum in the ecosystem in the area she was just at, which means that she causes a huge problem in that area when it comes to the weather. And so for our heroes, they're already experiencing some harsh weather. But with her leaving like that again, the weather is only going to get worse. Now, for Storm, she can most likely survive. But for Cyclops and Charles Xavier, most likely they cannot. And so once you have Sienna use her powers to disappear, the weather gets completely worse in that area. But luckily for our heroes, they found an escape pod from their Blackbird they crashed earlier. Now, with this escape pod, they were able to actually hide inside of it to stay warm for the time being. But also, they were able to at least ride out the bad weather long enough to fly out of that area. And when they do, they are founded by Bishop and also Psylocke. Because remember, they're in the outside of that area wondering how in the world they were going to be able to save the lives of their close allies. But now they were able to easily find their friends just flying out of that area. And so they used their Blackbird to connect their Blackbird to that escape pod and take everybody home. And that really kind of ends today's video. Now, for Sienna Blaze, we are going to see her again in Uncanny X-Men 301. But like I said earlier, that issue right there actually takes place after this one, even though it got released before this one. Because in the 1990s, especially after the Executioner song, with all the different X titles they had at that time, it got a little bit tad bit confusing on what to read first, because all the X books were trying to connect with one another, but at the same time, each X book had their own storyline going on that truly did affect each other books. And so it got a tad bit confusing. Either way, what's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men, but now we are going to sit down and actually cover a very important issue, because this is the issue where we basically get the death of another character in X-Men comics, but her death really does affect a certain character. But the entire issue is really more of getting the point of view of somebody else dealing with the death of this character and the whole idea of how death affects people in different kinds of ways. And you see what I mean as we go through today's video. Now, this is going to be our last video when it comes to Uncanny X-Men leading into Fatal Attractions. And so here is Uncanny X-Men issue number 303. I do hope you enjoy today's video. And so getting into the opening pages for today's video, we actually pick up with Jubilee. Now, this is Jubilee just hiding out in the ready room of Charles Xavier. Now, really, I don't want to sit down to explain what is the ready room. Just know that it's a special room that held Charles Xavier kind of observe everything around the world to make sure he's ready, but also his X-Men are also ready for things to come down the road. But you have Jubilee hiding out in the ready room because, well, she had just went through something very, very horrible. And so you have Jean Grey walking into the room to see if Jubilee is actually okay. And so we're going to use Jubilee as a way to kind of learn what exactly happened, like why she's so sad and why it's affecting every single member of the X-Men in this book, because we don't see the entire team. We do see the gold team at least in this book. And so with Jubilee, we begin to go back in the past and begin to learn what exactly happened. And so now we jump back a few hours ago where we actually pick up with Jubilee with Illyana, the younger sister of Colossus. Now remember, when it comes to Illyana, she has been given the legacy virus. Now the legacy virus is a virus made by Strife, and really he had released the virus at the very end of the Executioner's song. Now remember, this virus is only killing off mutants, but for Charles Xavier and Moira Taggart, they have been trying their best to figure out how to fight against the virus. But the problem is nothing is working. And so for Illyana, she's dying. Now, let's not forget, they have not told Colossus that his younger sister has the virus. Really, when it comes to Charles Xavier and also Moira Taggart, they have not told anybody that Illyana has the legacy virus. Instead, everyone else believes that she's just very sick. Now, the rest of the Gold team, Storm's team, at this point in time, Marvel Comics, is away right now because in our last video, they went over to Texas to help out Forge to fight against Fitzroy. And so right now, it's just Jubilee, Charles Xavier, Moira Taggart, and also, well, Kitty Pryde. Now, with Kitty Pryde, you could technically say that is the moment where Excalibur is now connected to all the other X books. Let me explain. You see, when it came to Chris Claremont and Alan Davis, when they first made Excalibur, in the early days, really up to issue number 68 to be more exact, when it came to Excalibur, it was not really connected to the other X books. Like for Chris Claremont and Alan Davis, their goal was to have that book be on its own, away from all the other X books. Now, over time, they would team up with the Avengers and also X-Men, but when it came to X-Men crossover before Fatal Attractions, Excalibur was not really part of any of those crossovers, except for X-Men Inferno. And even then, they had appeared at the very last second of that event before it officially ended. And they did not work with the other X-Men teams in that event. And so when it came to Excalibur, you could technically say it was an X team, but they were not really used in any of the X crossovers until, well, Fatal Attractions. But Kitty Pryde is now here. And so the reason why Shadowcat is actually there is because she got a phone call from Colossus. You see, while she was with Excalibur, she got a call from him saying like, hey, listen, my sister is sick, really, really sick. And we have no idea what's happening to her. But I want you to know because one, you and my sister were very close, but also two, because you and I were also very close at a time. And so it's for Kitty Pryde realizing that her childhood friend is about to die. Now, if you have not seen my coverage over the X-Men and you're kind of wondering how in the world Kitty Pryde is best friends with a young girl like Illyana, who's like 6 years old at this point, well, don't worry because Jubilee has the same question. And also you have Jean Grey use her powers as a way to explain the actual friendship of Kitty Pryde and Illyana, but also the origin of Illyana when it came to X-Men comics up to this point right here. You see, for Illyana, when she first appeared in Marvel Comics, she was literally a young girl like she is right now. 6 years old, maybe, but she went over to America to stay with Colossus for a short period of time and also the rest of the X-Men. But that was the moment where she was actually grabbed and taken over to Limbo. Now, while being in Limbo, she had officially aged up. But here's the catch though. You see, she was in Limbo for like many years, but back on Earth, she was only gone for like 6 seconds, kind of showing that time moves differently in Limbo. Either way, when the X-Men were able to bring her back over to Earth, well, she was no longer that young little girl. Instead, she was now a teenager. And so when she was a teenager, you had her and Kitty Pryde being able to build up a very close friendship with one another, becoming best friends. Now, thanks to X-Men Inferno, they turned Illyana back into a young girl again, but she also forgot all the time she had when she was a new mutant. And so for her, she sees Kitty Pryde as just a girl who's very close to her big brother Colossus. And so you have Jubilee learn from Jean Grey the actual friendship between Kitty Pryde and also Illyana. And so as we go back into the past, once again, we pick up with Jubilee right now walking into the room where Charles Xavier is at. Now, for Charles Xavier, like I said earlier, him and Moira McTaggart, they have been trying their best to hopefully find a cure for, well, Illyana. But the problem is, everything they're trying to use is just not working. All the different kind of tech, alien tech as well, it's just not working. There's no way to actually save the life of Illyana, that she is going to officially die. And so when Jubilee walks into the room to see Charles Xavier, she can see on his face, this is a man who has been defeated by this virus. This is a man who's really upset about the fact that he was not able to save the life of the young girl that he was actually close to, because let's not forget, when it came to X-Men comics, he was there when she first came to the school to America with Colossus and also the rest of the X-Men team, where she was in limbo and gone for a short period of time. Like, he was there with her. He knows her somewhat very well. Now, he did leave to go to space, and so Magneto did took over his school for a short period of time, but he was still there with her. And so to see a young girl like her officially dying is breaking the man's heart. And also Jubilee realized that she could actually die because he can't find a way to save her. And so for Jubilee, she does not really have a choice here. All she can do is just sit there and watch and possibly wait for the moment where Illyana is actually going to die. Now, she does go back in the room to hang out Illyana and also Kitty Pryde, and to hopefully just cheer the young girl up. And maybe, just maybe, a miracle could possibly come through. But for right now, for Kitty and Jubilee, it's just to be there for her last final few moments. And really, for Colossus, he has no idea that it got to the point where his sister might die. Like, Charles Xavier knows the actual truth. Charles Xavier knows about the fact that this virus, there's no way to actually cure it. That basically, Illyana is going to officially die. And so you have Charles asking Storm, like, hey, when are you coming back? Because I want y'all here. But it's Charles saying more of, I need Colossus here for the final moments of his sister's life, or possibly tell him in advance what is actually happening to her. It does get to the point where for Illyana, she's on the verge of death. Now, I know I have been saying that in the entire video, but what I mean right now is like, she's in her final moments. And so you have Charles Xavier give her some Shi'ar tech that will put her mind technically in a coma to kind of ease the pain for her. But in reality, she's still going to die. And so for Kitty Pryde, for Jubilee, for Moira McTaggart, it's really Charles Xavier saying, I'm giving up. There's nothing I can do. She is going to die here in front of us. And right now, all we can do is to hope, just hope that she can hold on long enough until Colossus comes back. But it's everyone realizing that they have to say goodbye to this little girl. She is going to officially die here any moment now. Now, the ending of this book is really more of Colossus finally coming back from Texas. And when he does, he sees everyone around the Blackbird, around the hangar, be more exact, right? And so when he gets out of the Blackbird, the jet, when he walks out, he's upset because he's wondering, who's watching his sister? Because everyone is there right now, but not downstairs with his sister. But then you have Charles being the one to inform him that Colossus, your sister has died. And so we jump back to the present day where it's Jubilee being held by Jean Grey to get that confirmation that Illyana has died thanks to the legacy virus. And this leads us into fatal attractions for Uncanny X-Men. So we're already done with X-Force and now Uncanny X-Men and also Excalibur too. But we still got to cover some more X-Factor and also the regular X-Men series and also the Gambit series, Sabretooth series, and also good old X-Men Unlimited as well. So we're almost there, guys, almost there. But fatal attractions is around the corner. But with that being said, what's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men. And as you all know right now, we are currently covering Fatal Attractions. Now, we have already covered the first two chapters of this six-part crossover between all the X teams like X-Force, X-Factor, both X-Men teams, and of course Excalibur as well, including Wolverine as well. But today, we're going to focus on Chapter 3 that takes place in Uncanny X-Men issue number 304. Now, for me and most fans of the X-Men, this is the moment where we can officially say kicks off Fatal Attractions. Because the first two chapters of Fatal Attraction kind of like solo chapters for two of the X teams, X Factor and X Force. The rest of the teams were not really officially affected by those two chapters. X Factor had to deal with the idea of being lied to by Val Cooper. And when it came to X Force, well, Cable got messed up by Magneto. Now, you could technically say that the Magneto part in X Force does lead into the later chapters of Fatal Attractions, but we're now officially picking up with the war between Magneto and Charles Xavier. And you see what I mean as we go through today's video. But as we get into the third chapter of Fatal Attractions, we actually pick up with Fabian Cortez being attacked by his fellow acolytes. Now remember, when it came to Fabian Cortez, he was the person who kind of killed off Magneto in the earlier parts of the X-Men in the 1990s. Now the reason why he did that, because he was trying to use Magneto as a martyr to kind of inspire people to join his side, but to also attack the human race. Now, we also had learned that for Fabian Cortez, he also killed off Magneto because he was part of the Upstart organization. Now, remember, the Upstart organization was a group of people who played this very sick game where they would go after other people around the world to receive points. People who were mostly mutants or at least had powers. Now, if you killed off a character that was really powerful, well, you receive more points than usual. And so when it came to Fabian Cortez, when he had killed off Magneto, he hit two goals. One, getting more people on his side, but two, he had received a lot of points in the Upstart organization. Now, when it came to our last few X-Men videos, he found out that Magneto is not dead. And so for him, it's the beginning of his downfall. He lost all those points he had originally because he believed he killed off Magneto, but also because the acolytes found out that he lied, that technically it was him who killed off Magneto, but also Magneto is alive. Now, the way the acolytes are finding out is because of Exodus. Now, you see my last couple videos for Fatal Attractions. All we know right now for Exodus is that he's this powerful mutant, and over time in our coverage over the X-Men, we're going to learn about all the different powers he may have. But right now, he is Magneto's right-hand man. And he's all like, hey guys, listen, that man right there, he lied to you. Magneto is alive. And matter of fact, he's offering you guys a home away from hell, away from Earth, on his new base in space, Avalon. So why not come with me to live a better life away from that traitor? Now, I want to jump over to Charles Xavier. And the reason why, because for Charles Xavier and the rest of the X-Men, really all the X teams, they're kind of dealing with the idea of the death of Illyana, the little sister to Colossus. Now, we all know that for Colossus, the 90s were really rough for the character. And the reason why, because he lost his brother to suicide, he lost his parents thanks to the Russian government, and now he lost his sister to, well, the legacy virus that was put out in the world thanks to strife. But for Charles Xavier, for the death of Illyana, he feels like a huge failure. Now, for Charles Xavier, it's really more the idea that there have been other mutants under his watch that had officially died, or while he was away, that had also officially died. And so he feels like right now he's failing the mutant race. But also, he kind of feels like he's alone. Now, technically, he is not. But for Charles Xavier, it's only him who could possibly lead the mutant race into into a better future. Nobody else. The X-Men are just helping out, but he's the man who has to lead that mission into the dream he wants to achieve. Now, really, you have Illyana appear, his space girl from also the leader of the Shi'ar Empire, and she realized that Charles Xavier is going through a lot, but she also realized that Charles feels alone. And so it's her just trying her best to comfort her man, say you're not alone. I'm here for you. You have the X-Men. You are not alone. But for Charles, he still feels like he is alone because it's up to him to save the mutant race. Now, when it comes to Magneto, he's also kind of feeling the same way as Charles Xavier, but there's some things different about the two characters. And what I mean by that statement is that for Magneto, he truly believes that he's the only savior for the mutant race, but he's not trying to achieve the same goal as Charles Xavier, the whole idea that mutants and humans can live together. For Magneto, he already knows it's not really possible, but on top of that, for Magneto, he's being motivated because he has seen the death of many young mutants across the world, but also because of his daughter. Now remember, by this point in Marvel Comics, for Magneto, he only had 3 kids: Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and also Anya. Now, Anya was his first daughter, his first child. Now, you're probably like, hey, wait, what about Polaris? They had not discovered the whole idea that Magneto was the father to Polaris until a few more years after this story arc right here. But for right now, let's just focus on Anya. Now, Anya was the first child of Magneto and Magda. Now, when it came to Anya, she had died unfortunately in a fire. Now, when it came to that fire, Magneto was trying his best to go back in there and save his daughter after being able to save his wife. But unfortunately, he was attacked by a mob of people, a mob of human beings. And so, unfortunately, he had to watch his daughter die in that fire. Now, for you guys out there kind of wondering, like I was when it came to the Krakoa era of X-Men comics, and if they had the ability to bring her back to life, they did not. And the reason why, because we kind of find out that Anya was not a mutant at all. She was a regular human being. And that was a big thing when it came to the Krakoa era of X-Men comics. The whole idea of bringing back dead mutants. You had to be a mutant. Either way, getting back to Fatal Attractions, for Magneto, watching his daughter die, but also other people die by the hands of the different humans across the world, is just so hard for him to deal with. And so it's him saying, like, it's up to me to lead the mutant race into a better future, leading into that war between him and Charles Xavier. Now, I kind of want to jump over to Kitty Pryde and Storm, and there's a good reason why, because over the years up to this point in the X-Men timeline, Kitty Pryde was kind of like the daughter for Storm, and Storm was kind of like the mother for Kitty Pryde. They had a very close bond for one another, and really, you could also say that Wolverine was kind of like the father to Kitty Pryde, as she was a daughter of many for Wolverine. But either way, for Kitty Pryde, she's kind of upset because she feels like if they were normal, none of this would happen to them. The idea of Cypher being killed off back in New Mutants, the idea of Thunderbird dying back in the early days of X-Men comics, the idea of Illyana now dying just only a few weeks ago. It's the whole idea that they're trying to achieve this goal for the mutant race, for the human race as well, but the problem is they're not getting close to that goal. Instead, the bodies are just piling up. And so for Storm, it's more of, hey, you know what? Let's have a little chat, Kitty Pryde. Let me talk to you a tad bit why I feel like it's great to be a mutant no matter what. Because for Storm, it's really more saying, even though the dead bodies are piling up, even though they've been battling against so many different groups out there across the world, you always have to look at the brighter side of things. Because even though the war is long, we're still winning small battles here and there. And those small battles, they're also piling up, which means that our goal may sooner or later come to reach. And that will be a great thing when it finally comes. Now, I want to jump over to Colossus because for Colossus, like I said, this man has been dealing with a lot. The whole idea of losing his sister, but also his brother thanks to suicide, his parents thanks to the Russian government. Like for Colossus, this was probably the worst time for him being an X-Men in the 1990s. And so you have Kitty Pryde and Storm realize that for Colossus, he's burning all his paintings, just getting rid of every single thing he had painted over the years. Because to him, there's no point in his life anymore. Now, also because for Colossus, he's having a hard time kind of controlling his feelings. And the reason why, because there was a story on accident had skipped over where he had fought against a character known as the Executioner. And Colossus got a tad bit damaged. And so he has a dent in his head. And that dent in his head is somewhat kind of affecting him on how he actually acts when it comes to his feelings. Either way, for Kitty Pryde, she realized that the man she loved when she was younger is kind of just cold now. He does not want to bond with anybody because this man has now lost his entire family in a short period of time. Now, for me, the next couple of pages are kind of hinting at the idea that we're getting another X team, a new team that's kind of like the New Mutants, but not being called the New Mutants. And that would be Generation X. And the reason why I'm saying that, because you have Bishop having a hard time understanding the whole idea of a funeral, because apparently in his future, they didn't have funerals. And so you have Banshee trying his best to explain things to Bishop, but also you have Bishop mention the fact that for Banshee, there was a point where down the road, he would actually become the last hope for the next generation. And just like that, it's the book saying like, hey guys, listen, we already have like 4 or 5 teams, but what if we had another team out there, but being led by Banshee? And so it's kind of saying like, hey, coming soon, coming soon. Right now, just these teams right here who are going to attend the funeral. Now, when it comes to Illyana's funeral, you have all the different X teams. You have X-Men, you have Excalibur, X-Force, X-Factor. Like everyone is there to, celebrate the life of Illyana. But then it kind of leads into the idea of Charles Xavier wanting to have this conversation with Colossus, see how he's dealing with the fact that now he lost another family member. But this is going to be Colossus just going off on Charles Xavier. Because for Colossus, it was Charles Xavier who kind of promised him the idea of, if you help me try to achieve the goal of mutants and humans living together in harmony, that everything will be great for you and your family as well. And so it's Colossus saying, your words had yanked me away from my family. It was your words that put me on this path. It was your words that had me believe in your dream. But now I lost my brother. I lost my parents. I lost my sister. I have lost everything because of you, Charles Xavier. Now, while you have Colossus just going off on Charles Xavier, Magneto arrives. Now, for Magneto, for him being here, it's more of a statement. Like, yes, he may have crashed the funeral for Illyana, but it's really more of Magneto saying, no, I came here because I am tired of seeing our people die. I am tired of the young mutants who are younger than me and Charles Xavier, dying in front of my eyes left and right because of different things, like the different factions out there for the different organizations who want to kill off the mutant race, the different fractions out there of mutants who are hurting other mutants. I am tired of this virus that's going around killing off mutants left and right, one by one. It's time for me, Charles, to pick up where you have fell off at. It's time for me to lead our people into salvation. And so it's Magneto saying, I didn't come here to fight you guys. No, I came here to offer you guys a better life, a better chance to actually survive. And so you have Magneto use his powers to make sure that no one is able to move so that they are able to listen to his words. Now, for Quicksilver, he does kind of hate the acolytes because if you saw my coverage over the chapter for X Factor when it came to fatal attractions, well, there was a moment where you had the acolytes went to a hospital, really more a hospice care for people who were on the verge of death. And so with that, you have the acolytes kill off every single person in that facility. And so for Quicksilver, it's all like, how can you take the acolytes back to your side, Father, for what they have done? They have killed off innocent humans who were on the verge of death. Now, for Magneto, he does kind of believe that the people that had died were not completely innocent. But at the same time, he does agree for what the acolytes have done was completely wrong. And so you have Magneto actually kill off one of the members of the acolytes who were part of that crime. And that would be Senyaka. Now, when it comes to Senyaka, he'll die in this chapter right here, but he'll come back down the road in later parts of our coverage over the X-Men. Now, with all that being said, is Magneto showing Quicksilver like, no, I do not agree for what they have done. But you also have to realize it was not me who had told the acolytes to kill off those humans. It was Fabian Cortez when he was the one in charge. But then you have Magneto show the X-Men his new home, his new fortress, and that would be Avalon. Now, this is a huge moment. And the reason why, because you have Charles Xavier realize that Magneto was able to build this base by using Shi'ar technology, the technology that Charles left behind when he left the X-Men in charge of Magneto. There was a brief moment in time where Magneto was the actual leader of the X-Men. Matter of fact, he was the master, the headmaster of Charles Xavier School when Charles left to go spend time with Illyana. And so with that happening, it gave Magneto the ability to get that Shi'ar technology, but also parts of the Gray Malkin that had belonged to Cable's old base, put it together to make a fortress. Now for Magneto, he's calling this heaven for the mutant race because Earth is hell, but heaven is this place away from all the bad things happening on Earth. And so Charles realized that it was his fault that Magneto was able to build this base with Shi'ar technology. Now, this leads into the moment where you technically have the X-Men being able to fight back against Magneto finally. And really, it's all because of Bishop. Let me explain. You see, Bishop has the ability to absorb energy. And so the entire time while you have Magneto using his power to get the X-Men at bay, well, his powers is also being used against Bishop, a form of energy that Bishop was able to absorb. And once you have Bishop be fully charged, he is able to release that energy right back at Magneto, sending him flying across the home of Charles Xavier, giving the X-Men the ability to finally move again. Now, for Magneto, he truly does blame the human race for the whole idea of the legacy virus. Now, we already know the legacy virus came from Strife, but it's really more Magneto saying it was the humans that kind of pushed Strife into that direction. It was the humans that led a Strife become the man he was, the man who decided to go ahead and release the legacy virus across the world. Now, you do have Rogue trying her best to use her powers as a way to stop Magneto, but the problem is that Magneto is so strong that even though Rogue took a portion of his power, really half his powers, he's still so powerful that he was able to take her down. Now for Bishop, he was able to receive more energy from the different members of the X-Men. And so right now they're trying to use that energy as a way to beat down on Magneto. Now for Magneto, he's technically in a tight bind right now because he's trying to use his powers as a way to protect himself, but also use his powers as a way to hold up Avalon. Either way, after a few more pages, you didn't have Colossus attack Bishop from behind because Colossus is actually going to join Magneto's side. Because for Colossus, he has now officially lost his trust in the dream of Charles Xavier. He lost his trust in the man who made him an X-Men, Charles Xavier. Is him wondering what is the other side like? And so is Colossus leaving the X-Men and joining the side of Magneto. Now, the ending of this chapter is really more of Charles Xavier and Magneto kind of hashing it out with one another, because it's Charles Xavier kind of realized that the man he called a best friend many years ago is long gone. Now, for Magneto, he believes that man had never existed. The man that Charles met was a false version of Magneto. That right now we're seeing right here is the real version of Magneto. Either way, you do have Charles Xavier use his powers as a way to force the powers of Magneto to send Avalon in Magneto back into space. And you have Charles fall down from the sky and having Archangel catch him. Now, that is the end for this chapter of Fatal Attractions, but we still have 3 more chapters to cover. In those 3 other chapters, things are going to get a whole lot crazier. But with What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men. As you all know, we are currently covering different stories that took place around the Fatal Attractions era for X-Men comics. The stories that came before Fatal Attractions and the stories that came after the event. Now today, we're going to sit down and cover another miniseries that came out, I want to say, a couple of months before the last 3 chapters for Fatal Attractions, and that would be the miniseries for Gambit. In the early 1990s, really late 80s, going into the 1990s, he became a very popular character. And so alongside with Cable, Sabretooth, Deadpool, you have Marvel say, you know what, let's give Gambit his own solo series as a way to explore a tad bit more about his origin story. Now, we don't get everything here in this miniseries, but we do get some good pieces of information to kind of help us understand the character a tad bit more. And you see what I mean as we go through today's video. Now, as we dive into the opening pages of this book, we are being introduced to a new character known as the Tide Collector. Now, this character right here, at first, kind of seemed like he was the boogeyman. And the reason why, because the narration in this story is kind of telling us that he only appears every 7 years. But apparently, he's so scary that you had mothers telling their children to be good, and they're not being good, well, he'll come for them. And so he does appear in the streets of New Orleans. Now, when he does appear, you have different people on the streets begin to freak out and realize they have to leave, because right now this is a thieves guild situation. And so they try to get away, except they're all killed off by another person, somebody we have not seen since our early coverage of the X-Men 1991 series. And I'll talk more about that character here in a moment. But let's go ahead and jump over to the star of the book, and that would be Gambit. And so when we actually pick up with the star of the book, we see him in the Danger Room, but working alongside with Rogue. Now, you have Wolverine and Storm kind of running this Danger Room session, but something I do want to point out early on in this section is, well, 2 things actually. But the first is that for Wolverine and Storm, they're still trying to see if Gambit and Rogue will be a great fit for the team, but also can these 2 characters actually work together? Because they realize that these 2 characters do have some feelings for one another. And that kind of leads into the second thing I do want to talk about. The whole idea of Rogue and Gambit in the early 1990s. Now, you may have seen some of my other X-Men videos where you see the 2 characters kind of trying their best to work things out and be an actual couple. I won't say a character, an actual couple. But in this story arc right here, written by Mackie, is really more the idea that they're still trying to figure out if they can be together. And really, it's Rogue and Gambit both showing that they're kind of scared to initiate an actual relationship. More Rogue than Gambit. But either way, you do have the two characters continue on with their training session. But while you have our two characters trying to continue on with their training session, you have somebody else trying to break into the school of Charles Xavier. Now, this person is going to be used as a way to bring Gambit back down to New Orleans. But while you have our two characters in the danger room, you actually have Rogue go out of her way to protect Gambit before he got seriously injured in the middle of the training session. But as soon as you have the actual session done, you have Gambit say, hey, listen, I gotta go because it seems like we have a visitor. And honestly, I don't know if they're good or bad. And so Gambit leaves just like that. And so you have Gambit go ahead and confront the person who is trying to break into the school of Charles Xavier, and that would be Henry. Now, Henry is kind of like a brother to Gambit. They're both part of the Thieves Guild, but when it comes to Henry, he's saying, listen, even though you have been kicked out of the Thieves Guild, we need you to come back home. Now, remember, when it came to Gambit, he had a wife before the X-Men, and her name was Belladonna, but she was part of the Assassin Guild, and apparently their marriage was supposed to bring peace between the two guilds, but the problem was her brother, Julian, hated the idea of Gambit marrying his sister, and so he asked for a duel against Gambit, and unfortunately he had been killed off, or we thought he was dead, because you have Henry say, listen, Julian's alive right now, and currently he's out there being a crazy killer, killing off different members of the Thieves Guild. But you also have Henry tell Gambit that it's time of the year where you have all the different families of the Thieves Guild come together for the collection, the Tide Collection. And apparently the assassins, including Julian, do not want the Thieves Guild to actually pull off this year's collection. Now, while you have Henry trying to tell everything to Gambit, somebody in the shadows kills off Henry just like that. Now, for Gambit, he knows who had killed off his friend, and that'll be a member of the Assassin Guild. And so for Gambit, it's time to go hunting. But then we get our first look of the adoptive father of Gambit, and that'll be Gene. Now, Gene Luck is actually, like I said, the father of Gambit, the adoptive father, but also the leader of the Thieves Guild. Now, apparently, he's hoping that all the different families of the Thieves Guild can come together for this year's collection, but also get their first taste of some kind of elixir. And this elixir is going to be really important for today's video. But at the same time, we're also getting another first appearance for another character, and that would be Kandra. Now, Kandra is actually an external, and we had talked about them before. It's a group of mutants out there who all have the ability of immortality, but they also have their own different abilities as well. Like, for example, she has the ability of being a psychic, telekinesis. Now, with that being said, apparently she plays a big role when it comes to the Assassin Guild and the Thieves Guild as well. But as we get back over to Gambit, we see that Gambit is trying his best to hunt down the assassins that had killed off his brother Henry. They're trying their best to hide, but for Gambit, he does not fight like a Thieves Guild. He fights like a member of the Assassin Guild. And so you have Gambit right now just trying his best to hunt them down. Now, I want to jump back over to Wolverine and Rogue just for a brief moment because you have Wolverine realize that between Rogue and Gambit, it's the same kind of love that he had for Mariko. And he's telling Rogue, hey, listen, one, he'll be okay. But two, like, you guys need to go ahead and be a couple. Come together as one because what I see is the same kind of love that I had for Mariko. And I would hate the idea of you two losing that love for just some strange reason. Back to the battle between Gambit and the members of the Assassin Guild. You have Gambit being able to take down the different members of the guild very easily. But here comes his next problem. You see, for Gambit, he finds out that Julian is alive. His brother-in-law, the brother to Belladonna, he is alive and well. And the question is right now, how? Because for Gambit, when it came to him leaving the Thieves Guild, it was because he killed off his brother-in-law to keep peace between the two guilds. But right now, apparently, Julian is alive. And Julian was able to get a few members of the Assassin Guild on his side to go after the Thieves Guild. But either way, once you have Gambit being able to take down Julian once again, you have Julian say one last thing to Gambit before teleporting away, saying that, hey, listen, Belladonna is alive. Now, if you saw my earlier coverage over the X-Men, you would know that for Belladonna, the last time we saw her, she died when the X-Men had teamed up with Ghost Rider to fight against the Brute, or we thought she had died, but apparently she is alive. And so the ending of the first chapter is really more of Gambit telling Storm, Charles, Xavier, and Wolverine that he has to leave. He has to go to figure out what is exactly happening right now in New Orleans with the Thieves Guild and also the Assassin Guild. The whole idea of Belladonna. Now for Storm and Wolverine, they want to go with him, but he says, no, this is a family thing. Now Rogue says like, hey, listen, I'm going no matter what. You can't stop me. Even though your wife may still be alive, I'm still coming with you because I care for you. And so you have the two characters leave to go figure out what's happening in New Orleans. And so as we dive into the second chapter, we pick up with Gambit breaking into the actual home base for the Assassin Guild. Now, when he does break into the base, it's Gambit right now just showing off his Thieves Guild ability, the ability to sneak around the actual place. But while doing that, he walks into a room. And when he does walk into that room, he finds Belladonna. She is alive and well. Well, not well, because apparently it seems that she's in a coma, but she's still alive technically. Now, you do have some members of the Thieves Guild appear, and they do try to battle against Gambit. And you have Gambit being able to actually fight against the Assassin Guild. And honestly, it's a very short battle because one, it's Gambit. He's a great fighter. But two, because the actual boss of the Assassin Guild walks into the room. The father of Belladonna and Julian. And technically, the father-in-law for Gambit is now here to have a conversation with his son-in-law. Now, his name is actually Maurice. Now, for Maurice, he has no love for Gambit at all. And the reason why, because he blames Gambit for the loss of both of his children, both Julian and also Belladonna. Now, technically, he does know that both of his kids are alive, except Belladonna's in a coma and Julian's some kind of crazy assassin at the moment. And really, for Maurice, he says, that is not my son. Yes, it is him, but he's not acting like he used to. Either way, for Maurice, he wants to go ahead and kill off Gambit. And so you do have the two characters begin to battle against one another. Now, again, it's Gambit. He's the hero of the book. He is actually able to take down Maurice very easily. But Maurice did not come alone. The man brought other assassins with him. And it does kind of seem like Gambit is completely surrounded. Except let's not forget that for Gambit, he also brought somebody else with him, and that would be Rogue. And so you have Rogue appear just in time to actually help out Gambit to fight against the other members of the Thieves Guild. Now, once he was able to actually take all of them down, he has a new goal in mind. And that new goal in mind? So for Gambit right now, his main goal is to save the life of his wife. Now, we also learn from Maurice that apparently when it comes to the two guilds, they do make a pact with one another. The Assassin Guilds get the power, but the Thieves Guild get the power of life. Now, the power of life is really interesting because it goes into the whole idea of this elixir, the elixir of life. And apparently, it's Maurice saying, use the elixir to save the life of your wife, the life of my daughter. Do it. Now, for Gambit, he has to at first pretend he has no idea what Maurice is talking about. Maurice says, dude, don't play around. Like, I know you know what I'm talking about. Either way, you have Rogue and Gambit leave with the body of Belladonna to possibly save her life with this elixir. Now, right after you have Gambit and Rogue leave with Belladonna, Julian appears again. Now, when he appears, he's still that crazy assassin who wants the elixir, but now he wants his sister as well, but keep both things away from his father. Because we do learn that apparently for Julian, he has formed his own group in the Assassin Guild, a rogue group. And so his main goal is to continue to take down his father's group, but to also get the elixir, but to also get his sister back as well. And so you actually have Julian say, listen, I won't kill you right now, father, because killing you would be too easy. But just know, we are not done here at all. But when we finally jump back over to Gambit and Rogue, we see them arriving at the home of the Thieves Guild as they're going through the actual ceremony for the collection. Now, for Gambit and Rogue, they kind of just bust into the room, and all the different members of the Thieves Guild cannot believe that Gambit is there. But it's Gambit saying, listen, I need to talk to my father. And so you actually have Jean say, listen, let me go ahead and talk to my son. But because you had Gambit just barge into the actual room, the actual ceremony has been stopped by the collector. He had actually left, but he says, fix your problem and we may, just may, be able to continue on with the ceremony. And he takes away the elixir of life with him. Now, the actual conversation is very short-lived. And the reason why, because you have Jean tell Gambit, like, listen, I could not give her the elixir of life because she is an outsider. She's not one of us. But on top of that, when it comes to the elixir of life, there are 3 different pieces of it. 3 different containers that contain different parts of the actual elixir of life. And unfortunately, they only have 1. Now, maybe the collector has another one, but the question is right now, where is the 3rd piece? And so you have Gambit realize that he will not get any help at all from the people he calls family. And so he has no choice but to figure out how he's going to save the life of Belladonna on his own with the assistance of Rogue. And so he leaves. Now, Pierre, another member of the actual guild, tells Jean, like, listen, we need all 3 pieces of the elixir of life to be able to go through the complete ceremony. And they are afraid that Gambit might actually ruin the entire thing. But now we actually pick back up with the Tide Collector, who's just minding his business until he is actually attacked by different members of the Assassin Guild that now works for Julian. But on top of that, he's also attacked by a member of the Thieves Guild as well, and that would be Pierre. And we do learn Pierre is actually working alongside with Julian to collect all 3 pieces of the elixir of life. And apparently, they can't do anything at all until they get all 3 pieces. And so Julian had paid Pierre to help out and get the other piece, or one of the 3 pieces. And so you have Julian and Pierre being able to actually get the jump on the collector and being able to get one of the 3 pieces of the elixir. The other piece he had left with it. And the 3rd piece is currently with the Thieves Guild. And so you have Julian say, listen, we already got 1 piece. And right now, I'm going after him to get the other piece. But your goal is what I paid you for, to get the piece your guild has. So let's go ahead and go through our plan. Now, for Gambit, he knows what he has to do. He has to leave Belladonna behind with Rogue to be able to get all 3 different samples of the elixir of life. And so he has to leave to go pay a visit to somebody he has not seen in a good while. Now, we also learned that he bought a home a while back to have a family with Belladonna. And so he tells Rogue, stay here with her to take care of her as I leave to hopefully figure out how I'm going to save the life of my wife. But as we get into the third chapter, we do pick up with Gambit once again. And we see that Gambit has traveled all the way over to, well, Paris. And the reason why? To find Kandra. Because Kandra does have huge connections to both of the guilds. And so he's kind of hoping with working with her could lead to him actually finding the elixir of life, but to also save the life of his wife. And so he arrives at Paris Casino. He does ask around for Kandra. And the different workers at this casino tell him like, hey, listen, we have no idea who you are talking about. But then he's confronted by some bodyguards. Now, these bodyguards are security guards, sorry. They work for Kandra. And their main goal is to, well, it seems to take him out, but at the same time, test him to see if Gambit is still, Gambit. Does he have the skills of a fighter? So once you have the security guards take him outside somewhere, you have Gambit being able to actually take them all out just like that. And after doing that, he's then confronted by the collector once again. And he's all like, hey, listen, Kandra wants to see you. And he knocks out Gambit and everything goes black. But now we have to jump over to Rogue, who stayed behind to protect Belladonna until Gambit is able to come back with the elixir of life. Now, while doing that, we're also being introduced to another new character, and that would be Maddie. Now, we learn very quickly here that Maddie is a healer. Now, unfortunately, we're not going to learn much about the character until down the road and later story arcs. Just know that she is a healer and also she works for the Thieves Guild. With all that being said, once you have Maddie actually leave the room, you have Rogue begin to think about using her powers to gain the memories of Belladonna. And the reason why? So that she is able to learn what it's like to be with Gambit, to feel the idea of being in love with Gambit. Because remember, these two characters, unfortunately, cannot be in a full-on relationship. And this moment right here is going to be very important, not just with this story arc, but other story arcs down the road as well. Now, when we jump back over to Gambit, we actually see Gambit waking up with the collector in front of him. And you have the two characters actually battle against each other. Now, as the fight goes on, the fight is actually broken up by Kandra. She does appear. Now, this is also a very important moment, and the reason why, because we begin to learn again more about Gambit and his connections to all these characters, including Kandra as well, because we learn that these two characters actually had a past with one another because they kiss. But for a brief moment, as we go back over to Rogue, she begins to think about the idea of just going ahead and touching the body of Belladonna to get the idea of what it feels like to be with Gambit. But then she realized she's one, being selfish, but two, she could seriously hurt Belladonna by using her powers. But then that is the moment Belladonna grabs Rogue. And when she does, bam, she begins to absorb all the memories of Belladonna with her being with Gambit. But then we jump back over to Kandra and also Gambit. Now, we learn here that Kandra is still very upset with Gambit because, again, this man was in love with her, but he also worked alongside with her. But apparently, he left her behind like he does to most of the women in his life. But she also knows that currently he's trying to get his hands on the elixir of life, but also she knows there are two other women in his life right now that has his heart, Belladonna and also Rogue. And she says, I know that currently you're going back and forth on who to choose, but either way, I know you're here for the elixir of life. Now, we also learn here that when it comes to Kandra being external, she was the one who has been technically using the Thieves Guild and the Assassin Guild for her own personal gain. And matter of fact, it was her who put the two guilds together and making sure they keep each other in check. Now, we don't get the full story here with Kandra and why she has done that, but apparently she's actually tired of both guilds and trying to create a new system. But she also tells Gambit, like, listen, if you work for me, you can have the elixir of life. but you have to kill off your father for all the damage you have done to my entire organization with the Thieves Guild and also the Assassin Guild. And so she pulls out his father saying, kill him and everything will be okay. But on top of that, you'll get the elixir of life. Now you have the book go back over to Rogue to kind of show us that Rogue is now getting the full-on experience of what it's like to be Belladonna but be in love with Gambit, to be able to touch Gambit, kiss Gambit, all those different things that Rogue unfortunately cannot feel at all. But now she realized that she may or may have not seriously damaged the mind of Belladonna. Now I want to jump back over to Gambit and Kendra because you have the two characters still talking to one another about the idea of, killing off his father to get the elixir of life. Now for Gambit, he does not want to do that at all. But before he is able to actually make that decision, well, that is the moment where you have Julian and other members of the Assassin Guild appear to attack Kendra and Gambit to kill Gambit off, but to also get the elixir of life. Now, Gambit is able to actually take down all the different members of the Assassin Guild, including Julian, but at the same time, Julian was still able to stab Jean, the father of Gambit. Now, you have Gambit being able to blast everyone out of the apartment of Kendra, but because he did save the life of Kendra while she was being attacked by Julian in the Assassin Guild, she realized that she's now in his debt. She realized that she officially owes him now. So because you had Gambit being able to save her life, she said, fine, you know what? You can leave alive and take your father as well. And so you have the two guys walk out. But before they do walk out, you have Gambit being able to steal a kiss from Kendra. Now, when he does get that kiss from her, he also takes her part of the elixir of life. And so now he just needs the other two. And so just like that, he walks out. But by the time she realized what he has done, it's too late. He's gone. And so she tells the collector, you know what? I want him dead. Tell the Thieves Guild, the Assassin Guild, tell everyone who are involved that Gambit must die. So as we get into the final chapter for this video, we do pick up with Gambit back in New Orleans. Now for Gambit, his main goal is to just get the final part of the elixir of life. He already has two. He got one from Kendra that he stole, and his father gave him the other one. And that leaves the final one that Julian stole earlier from the collector. And so you have Gambit right now just going into a church where you have Julian believing that he'll meet up with Pierre and get the other sample or other part of the elixir of life, to only find out that no, he's meeting Gambit, who was then able to get all three pieces, getting the final piece from Julian. Now, for Julian, he begs Gambit to go ahead and give him all three pieces of the elixir. And the reason why, because he needs it badly, because apparently for Julian, he has been using the actual elixir of life, but there is a side effect to it. You see, the side effect changes you. It makes you go a tad bit insane as well. And so you have Julian go ahead, take off his mask to reveal what happens to some people who may take the actual elixir of life. And this brings in a huge problem because you didn't have Gambit take Julian back over to his father, Jean, being like, hey, Dad, did you know about the side effects of the elixir of life? And for Jean, he says, yes, I have always known about the side effects of the elixir of life. But the thing is, it's up to our members when it comes to them taking the elixir of life. Now, for Gambit, the reason why this is a problem because he was hoping to use the entire elixir of life on his wife to save her life. But unfortunately, now he's wondering if he does that, could her mind also be altered like Julian? Could his body be deformed just like Julian? And so now he is wondering what he should do when it comes to his wife and the elixir that could save her life. Now, before you have Gambit being able to make that kind of decision, well, we kind of find out that the entire church is surrounded by different members of the Thieves Guild and also members of the Assassin Guild as well. Because again, Kendra said Gambit must die. Tell both guilds that he has to go. And so because of that, they are now working with the Collector surrounding the entire church. But when they get inside, Gambit is gone. He was able to cause a small diversion to kind of keep them distracted long enough to allow him to escape, to go back over to Belladonna. And really, when it comes to Belladonna, she's freaking out at the moment because she's having some kind of seizure. And for Maddie, she can't really help out Belladonna. She has no idea what exactly happened to her. We do because it's Rogue. And the thing is, Rogue is now thinking about all the times Belladonna was with Gambit. And so because of that, Rogue is now able to imagine herself being with Gambit like Belladonna was when she was with Gambit. And for Gambit, he does arrive just in time back to his house to hopefully get to Belladonna with the elixir of life. Except by the time he gets there, most of the members, not most, some of the members of the Assassin Guild are there to fight against him. And so you have Gambit trying to use his powers as a way to fight back against them. Now, once he was able to do that, he goes inside, except when he does get up the staircase or trying to go upstairs, he is confronted by the Collector, who now has Rogue and also Belladonna in his grasp. Now, you do have Gambit just go ahead and try to get close enough to the Collector so that he is able to just grab onto his jacket. Now, once he's able to grab onto his jacket, you have Gambit say, hey, I'm going to use my powers on your jacket to basically send you flying right out the building. And just like that, there goes a Collector. And so when it comes to Gambit, he was able to save Rogue and also Belladonna's life. But now the question is, should he use the elixir of life on his wife? Because again, there are side effects. And right now he's wondering if those side effects will actually come out if he gives it to her. And so for Gambit, he does decide to just go ahead and give Belladonna the actual elixir. Now, he has to make sure that he gives her the right amount so that she will not be affected by the side effects of the elixir. But then Julian walks into the room. Now, when he does, you have Julian go ahead and destroy the container that was holding the elixir. And the problem is now Belladonna may not get the elixir at all. And neither will Julian. Now, here's the thing. By this point in the story, Julian has now become completely selfish over wanting the elixir. And the reason why, because the side effects are kicking in right now. Originally, he was trying to get the elixir for himself and for his sister. By this point, it's more about him, just him. But now he has doomed his sister. But then when he tries to battle against Gambit, he is killed off by his own father, Marquise. Now, for Marquise, this is actually a big moment. And the reason why, because it's Marquise saying, listen, the Assassin Guild will no longer go after Gambit. And the reason why, because this man was trying his best to save the life of my daughter. Now, it does seem like he has failed, but he still tried his best. And that right there is so important. Now, on top of that, the Thieves Guild is no longer going after Gambit as well. And the reason why? Because for Gambit, it's the whole idea of he's their brother. He's part of their family. And they're also going to back off as well. And so both people are kind of like, hey, we are not going to attack Gambit. And matter of fact, you have both guilds say, we are no longer going to follow the path that Kendra has put out for us. It's now for a new beginning for the Thieves Guild and also the Assassin Guild as well. Now for Kendra, she can't believe in the idea that she has now lost both guilds, but she realized that she has to leave. And so just like that, she teleports out of there. Now, after all of that, you then have Jean tell Gambit that, listen, even though we're no longer coming after you, you have to realize that you are no longer welcome in New Orleans. And the reason why? Because this family right now, we all hate you because you're now forcing us to change. Now, maybe down the road, the newer members may forgive you, but us right now, the current members, we cannot. And so that these guilds leave, hoping that Gambit will also leave as well soon. Now, this leads in a sad moment, but times two, because you have Gambit realize that there's enough of the elixir that has spilled on the bed sheet. And so he is able to squeeze enough out to put in the mouth of Belladonna. Now, when she finally wakes up from her coma, she looks at Gambit and realizes that she has no idea who he is. And that is a huge moment right there. But on top of that, we also have to realize that the reason why she may not remember anything about Gambit because she touched Rogue earlier. Now, you have him say, you know what? It's okay. It's probably the best for us to go our separate ways again. And so you have Gambit walk away thinking that he'll get with Rogue. But Rogue knows what's wrong with Belladonna, and she's so afraid to tell Gambit to break his heart. And so she flies away. Okay, so getting back into our coverage over the X-Men, we actually pick up with X-Men Unlimited issue number 2. Now remember, when it comes to X-Men Unlimited, it was a 1990s series that was really more to kind of use to test out new writers or to test out new artists that came over to Marvel Comics. Now, when it came to X-Men Unlimited, it was actually released every 3 months. So in 1 year, you only get like 4 issues, and that would be it. Now, we already covered the first one a while back, the whole idea of the X-Men leaders being attacked by the Upstart organization. But when it comes to X-Men Unlimited issue number 2, it really does tie into the whole idea of fatal attractions. I have been saying this in our last few videos when it comes to our coverage over fatal attractions. You see, for fatal attractions for Marvel Comics, it was a huge event. And the reason why, because they were able to use all the different X books minus Cable for this actual crossover. So Excalibur, X-Factor, X-Force, X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, and also Wolverine. But when it came to fatal attractions, you also had other storylines that took place in the middle of those chapters when it came to the main storyline for fatal attractions. Like, for example, we had just covered the 3rd chapter of the actual crossover that took place in Uncanny X-Men issue number 304. And so after that issue right there, you had a bunch of different storylines happen before we dive into X-Men issue number 25, which is the next main chapter for Fatal Attractions. Now today, we're going to cover X-Men Unlimited issue number 2. And the reason why, because it's now the world finding out that Magneto is once again back. And this time, it could be a big problem. And here's the reason why. Because for Magneto, he realized that for the mutant race, there's no way that the mutant race can actually survive on Earth. Because the human race is now finding different ways to actually attack the mutant race. But also because of the legacy virus. Now, we're not going to dive into the legacy virus in this video. Just know that by this point in Marvel Comics, there was some kind of virus out there that was released by Strife to kill off the mutant race. But getting back over to Magneto, when it came to Magneto, he realized that the mutant race cannot survive on Earth. And so he took pieces of the Grey Malkin, the old base of Cable, and built a new base called Avalon. Now he's calling Avalon the heaven for the mutant race because Earth is hell. Go ahead and leave hell and come over to heaven, and we'll live in peace on my new base in space. Now, when it comes to Magneto, it's not him opening the doors to all the mutants across the world. Only the ones he deems to be worthy to live on Avalon alongside with him. But like I said, it's now Magneto making his presence known. And so with his presence being known, it's now the human race freaking out and wondering what they should do to Magneto before he tries to do something down the road that could possibly lead to him attacking the Earth. Now, when it comes to this actual book, the entire story is being told to us by one character, and his name is Adrian Iscol. Now, when it comes to Adrian, in the opening pages of this book, it's really more of Adrian telling us about the first time he had met Magneto and what was it like. It was completely scary for him. And let me explain, because in this flashback, it took place in a time where when it came to Germany, it was actually two different territories. You had East Germany that was trying to attack Magneto on Wundagore Mountain. Now, really, when it came to East German's army, they were just kind of driving by, but for Magneto, he hated the idea that they had wandered into Wundagore Mountain. Now, Wundagore Mountain is very important for a lot of different things in Marvel Comics, but for the sake of this video, the main reason why it's so important for this book goes all the way back over to the High Evolutionary. Now, he had created creatures that were animals that would act and walk just like humans. For example, there was a character known as Bova. Now, Bova looked like a cow, but could walk and talk like a human. Now, the reason why she's so important, because when it came to Bova, she ran into Magda, the wife of Magneto. Now, by that point, she was on the run and trying her best to hide from her husband, Magneto. But she was also pregnant with twins, the Scarlet Witch and also Quicksilver. So you have Bova being the one to kind of help her through the entire pregnancy. Now, when it came to Magda, she had died on the mountains and she was buried on the mountains. And so for Magneto, he hates the idea that this army right now is trying to climb up the mountains and kind of ruin this sacred area that Magneto claimed to be sacred because his wife was buried there. And so you have Magneto using his powers on this army. Now, for Magneto, going up against the army was kind of like light work for him. He was able to use his powers to take out the entire army like it was nothing. Now, the person in charge of this group right here, he does call for a full-on retreat. And so we shift over to Adrian and also a fellow soldier, and you have the two of them just trying their best to get away. But here comes the problem. You see, they run into Bova, but they also found the grave of Magda. Now, for Magneto, he gets very upset. And the reason why, because he now believes that Adrian and this other soldier has now just ruined the eternal rest of Magda, his wife. And so he gets so angry because he has all those flashbacks where the human race has caused him so much pain, so many problems in his entire life, but also towards other mutants as well. And so he does use his powers to kill off that other fellow soldier that was with Adrian. Now, for Adrian, he's kind of like, oh my God, my partner there was just trying to surrender and you killed him just like nothing. But for Magneto, it's kind of like, no, I'm trying to use him as an example. The whole idea that mutants and humans are just alike. We all feel the same thing. The whole idea of losing somebody hurts both sides in the same kind of ways. Now, as we go to the present day, we actually pick up with Adrian in therapy. Now, it does seem like for the therapist that Adrian is not trying to actually heal from that moment in time. It kind of sees that for Adrian, he still has this bloodthirst. And so she's kind of wondering, like, why do you even bother coming to therapy if you're not trying to achieve the idea of changing for the betterment of your mind? But for Adrian, it's more of like, I came here hoping that I could find something different, a different path that I don't want to take really. And so it's him kind of saying like, I was hoping that maybe, just maybe, you could help me talk myself out of going after Magneto, a different path in life. But I feel like I have no choice. I have to go after Magneto because I see what he truly is. But now we have to jump over to Empire State University, where we actually pick up what a character known as Gabrielle Haller. Now, Gabrielle Haller is really important because she has huge connections to both Charles Xavier and also Magneto. Now, for the sake of this video, I'm only going to truly focus on her connection to Magneto, and that is really it. Now, we see her kind of giving out a speech to a class of people who are currently studying about the idea of Magneto. Now, for Gabrielle, like I said, she has huge connections to Magneto, and so she truly knows a lot about him. She even says, like, you guys are studying a man and kind of wondering if this man is really evil or not. Well, here I am right now to kind of give you the complete story of the actual origin of Magneto. Now, really, for Gabrielle, kind of telling the origin of Magneto is pretty neat. And let me explain why. Because if you were somebody back in the 90s trying to get into X-Men comics, this was the perfect book to pick up to get the full understanding of the character of Magneto. And so as she talks to the entire class, we do get a quick review of the actual character. Like, for example, this was a man who lived through the Holocaust. Now, while trying to survive in the Holocaust, he met his wife Magda. Now, I have said in my earlier videos that when it came to Magneto and Magda, they had another child before the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, and that would be Anya. Now, we had talked about the idea that Anya was a young girl who died in a fire because there were villagers who were very upset with Magneto, and they set his home on fire. Now, back then, that was the first time Magneto kind of knew that he was different, that he had powers. And he tried to use his power to save his daughter, but unfortunately, he was unable to do that. Now, while he did use his powers to attack the villagers, it scared Magda, and that is why she ran over to Wundagore Mountain. Now, when it came to Magneto, he tried his best to move on with his life. And so he began to work at a hospital that was kind of created to help out people who were trying to survive after being in the camps of the Holocaust. And that was where he ran into Gabrielle. And he was able to properly heal her, but also build a bond with her. Now, for Gabrielle, she does not give us more information after that moment, but she does tell us this right here. For the character of Magneto, is he truly a dictator? Because to her eyes and her mind, he is not. Because here's the thing, he has no country that he is fighting for. Is here right now trying to fight for a cause to help out the mutant race. And so she kind of ends her speech to have the class wonder, hey, is he truly an evil person, or maybe, just maybe, he's actually a good person? Now, I want to jump back over to Adrian. Here's the reason why. Because you have Adrian being this hot-tempered character where he's kind of just on this plane and his mind is full of hatred things about Magneto. Now, we also see him kind of reading a book about fatal attractions, a book called Fatal Attraction. And that book is going to be very important for the next few sections coming up very soon. But while on this plane over to New York, we also see Adrian kind of see a man who has hair just like Magneto. And because his mind is full of hatred, he automatically believes that guy right there is Magneto. And he goes to confront that guy to only find out this is an old man that has hair like Magneto. And as Adrian realized that he needs to calm down because right now his mind wandering could actually get him in trouble. Now, for Adrian, once he's able to get into New York, he gets a hotel. Now, once in his hotel room, he does watches some TV. He watches, well, Nightline. Now, while watching Nightline, the actual author of the book he just read, Fatal Attractions, is actually on Nightline. And that will be J.B. Chambers. Now, for Chambers, he's kind of on the side of the mutant race. And let me explain, because he says the humans are at fault for the birth of the mutant race. You see, for the humans out there, we have brought so many toxins into the environment. And so those toxins had made their way over to humans' DNA. And so over time, it led to the birth of the mutant race. Now, this is not Chambers actually saying that it's the actual origin of the mutant race, but it's him saying like it could be the actual reasoning why we have mutants on Earth. But at the same time, we should try our best to live and work alongside with the mutant race because we have no idea if we are responsible for the actual birth of the race. But also on Nightline, you have Graydon Creed. Now, can I say that every time he pops up, I have somebody in the comments section saying like, hey, Graydon Creed is the son of Sabretooth and Mystique. Yes, you guys are right. But for Graydon Creed, let's not forget, because the way Mystique had raised him, it kind of led to him beginning to hate on the mutant race completely. He wants to wipe them out off the board across the entire Earth. And so for him, it's him saying like, no, you are wrong, Chambers. Like, mutants are not our fault. And matter of fact, we should not be trying to live with them at all. It's the two guys right now just going back and forth on Nightline about the whole idea of what to do with the mutant race. Now, we do pick up with Adrian meeting up with Gabrielle. Now, for this meeting is really more of Adrian knowing that Gabrielle is the best person to find Magneto. Now, I don't know if I said this earlier in the video, but the first half of this storyline does take place before Uncanny X-Men issue 304. And so with that being said, the public does not know for sure that Magneto is alive. Now, the government only found different clues to kind of prove that there's a possibility the man is alive. And so you have really more of Adrian coming to Gabrielle saying, listen, I need you to help me find Magneto. You are the best person to figure out where he is at, but also you are the best person to help us to bring him down. Now, for Gabrielle, even though she knows that Adrian's working for his government, which is Germany, and she knows that it's really more of like trying to get ready to bring him down just in case he does attack the Earth, she can kind of tell for Adrian's sake that this is more personal, that he wants to actually kill off Magneto. And she says, I'll help out, but I can tell right now, if you cross the line and try to kill him, I will step away. I'm only helping you to capture him and then put him on trial to kind of see if other people of the world truly believes that man is really guilty. Now, we have to jump over to the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Now, remember, in the 1990s, by this point, this version of the Brotherhood was being led by Toad. So you had Toad, Blob, Fantasia, and also Pyro. Now, they're supposed to meet up with somebody else, but they are then confronted by Exodus. Now, when it comes to Exodus, it's really more him being the right-hand man of Magneto, but also offering different mutants across the world that Magneto had deemed worthy. Say, hey, you know what? I feel like you should come up to Avalon and live in heaven. And so when it comes to Exodus, he tells Toad, Pyro, and Blob that he's not there for them. Instead, he's here for Fantasia. Now, for Toad, he's really upset by this. And the reason why, because in the early days of X-Men comics, Toad was kind of like the clown of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, the jester. You have Magneto use him for almost all different kinds of schemes. So for Toad, he feels like he has the right to go to Avalon. But as Exodus saying, no, you don't. For Magneto, you're not worthy, not Pyro, not Blob, only her. Now she says no, and he leaves. But it really shows that for Toad, nothing has changed. For Magneto, Toad is technically nothing. Now, the next section, we jump back over to Adrian. Here's the reason why. Because for Adrian, we do learn that he was the one who was supposed to meet up with Toad. Now, by this point, the two characters, they did meet up. But for Toad, it was really more the idea of he wanted to get revenge against Magneto, and he realized that if anybody out there is going to try to kill off Magneto, he would be down with the idea of sharing any kind of information that might help that person get that revenge against Magneto. And so for Adrian, he was able to collect a ton of information about Magneto from Toad. Now, here's the thing, because I'm going to skip over a few things, because you also have Adrian learn more things about Magneto after the fact that he became Magneto. Like the whole idea that he was turned into a baby, but then he returned adulthood later on in X-Men comics. Now, when it comes to him being a baby, it's going to be very important for the later chapters of this video. But for Adrian, he does hear Toad in this interview talk about the idea that Magneto was kind of like, well, Hitler. And here's the reason why you had technically Magneto be compared to Hitler. Because for Magneto, he knew how to keep people in line, but not by physical force, but the whole idea of his courage. The whole idea that maybe, just maybe, he could possibly accomplish his goals. And just like Hitler, it was kind of the same thing. His courage, the way he talked about himself and his goals, got other people in line. And so it's Toad saying Magneto was just like Hitler in many different ways. Now, like I said earlier, the whole idea of Magneto being a baby is going to be very important for today's video. And let me explain why. Because we jump over to Gabrielle having a conversation with, well, Moira Taggart. Now, this conversation is really important because both ladies had unfortunately dated Charles Xavier, and unfortunately, they got their heart broken by Charles Xavier. Now, for Moira Taggart, the whole idea of Magneto being a baby is really important for her. And the reason why, because when he was a baby, she was the one who's kind of taking care of him. But she remembered that when he was an adult before turning into a baby, he was technically a villain. And so she thought she could use her science skills to kind of alter his DNA, alter his genes where when he grows up, he'll be a good guy rather than a bad guy. And so in reality, it kind of did work, but then down the road, he still turned into a bad guy once again. And so she kind of feels sad about the idea of even trying that on a man who was just trying to achieve a goal that he believed was best for the mutant race. Now, the reason why you have Gabrielle calling up Moira Taggart, because she was the one who was trying to alter his DNA, alter his genes, hopefully turn him into a good guy when he turned back into adulthood, she would know best on how to actually bring him down. And so with that kind of information, then you could possibly build a weapon or some kind of game plan on how to bring down Magneto. Now, we do jump back to Adrian and also Gabrielle, but now we see the two of them a few weeks later going over to Gentech, a company that was able to build up a suit that would give a man the ability to take out Magneto if they wanted to. And so for Adrian, he begins to hear how the suit is actually able to sneak up on Magneto. Now, for Adrian, he knows that he's not allowed to kill off Magneto. And so that is why they're giving him a gun that will only stun Magneto. Now, thanks to Moira Taggart's report and also Gabrielle's report, they have a full understanding of how Magneto's powers work. And so with this suit, Adrian should be able to actually take out Magneto. Now, some time passes again where we do pick up with the American government talking about the idea that Magneto has returned. And really, this kind of picks up where Uncanny X-Men 304 left off at. The whole idea of Magneto coming down to Earth with Avalon, but also offering heaven towards the X-Men, X-Factor, and also X-Force. Now, with that being said, we already know all three teams said no except for Colossus. But with the coming back down, the American government knows about him. And so they're wondering if they should go ahead and make a move. But here's the problem though. For Magneto and also Exodus, they have not really done anything at all to be charged for a crime at the moment. But at the same time, you still have all these different parties of the American government agree that Magneto has to be stopped. But the problem is his base is in space. They have no way to actually travel up to space to take him out. Now for Adrian, he knows that there's one place on Earth that will give them the opportunity to take out Magneto. and that would be at the grave of Magda, where you have Magneto just trying to pay respect to his late wife or late ex-wife. Either way, you also have Adrian there with the weapon and having the opportunity to actually take out Magneto. But here's the thing. For Adrian, he kind of realized it'd be wrong to kill off Magneto this way. And the reason why, because it seems that for Adrian, he fully understands what Magneto has gone through. Because if you go back to all those different pages where you had Adrian being able to gather information about Magneto, where he had learned about the origin of Magneto, he realized that this is a man who had just lost so much over the years in his life. And so he kind of understands that for Magneto, he's not really like Hitler. He's trying to bring up the mutant race, but also protect the mutant race from being killed off from the human race. And so even though for Adrian, he lost his fellow soldier brother thanks to Magneto killing him off 7 years ago in the past, he realized that he only lost so little compared to what Magneto had lost over the years. And so Adrian is unable to kill off Magneto when Magneto was completely defenseless. And he drops the gun, and Magneto sees him. And you have Magneto realize that he was only seconds away of dying, but he gets to live and goes back over to Avalon. And for Adrian, well, this was his last appearance ever in Marvel Comics. But what's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over Fatal Attractions as we continue our coverage over the X-Men. Now, as you all know, when it came to Fatal Attractions, it was the first crossover that used all the different X books at that time. Excalibur, X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, X-Force, X-Factor, and also Wolverine. Now, Cable was not used in the actual crossover, but he did have some story arcs that took place between the main storyline of Fatal Attractions. And really, we're at that point right now when it comes to our coverage over this crossover. Like I said, there were some stories that led into Fatal Attractions, but there were a lot of stories that took place between the main storyline of the actual event. Like, for example, Uncanny X-Men 305. Now, this issue is not really special, but I still want to go ahead and cover it just in case anything big down the road comes up that does a callback to this particular chapter. But it's also setting up another chapter down the road for X-Men Unlimited issue number 2. And you see what I mean as we go through today's video. And so as we get into the opening pages for today's video, we actually pick up with a character known as Opal. Now, Opal is the girlfriend to Iceman. And really, if you have seen my earlier videos when it came to our coverage over the X-Men, we had talked about the idea that we're getting very close to the end of the relationship between Iceman and Opal, kind of giving Iceman the chance to meet somebody new and possibly get close to that person. And the reason why I'm saying that, because in the opening pages of this book, we actually see some random soldiers trying to attack Opal. Now, luckily for her, Iceman, Rogue, and also Bishop were there to save the day. And so they were able to use their powers to protect Opal, but also take down the guys who were soldiers who were coming after her. Now, those guys, once you had our heroes being able to take them down, they just fell apart. And what I mean by that is their body just turned to flat out goo. And the question is right now, were those characters actually alive at all? Now for Opal, she wants to know what exactly is going on here because her front yard was turned into a war zone. Now for Iceman, he does explain things to his girlfriend by saying, hey, listen, we have been using Cerebro as a way to watch over the world, but we didn't realize that there were a few soldiers who were near your home that were not coming up as humans, but also not coming up as mutants either. And so we wanted some answers. but we also realize they were trying to use you as a way to get to me. Now, for Opal, she realized that Iceman had just basically told her that she was bait. They technically used her as bait to pull those guys out into the open so the X-Men could be able to actually take them down. Now, like I said, we're getting very close to the end of the actual relationship between these two characters because for Opal, she hates the idea of being pulled into this kind of mess. She hates the idea of dating a mutant who's part of a team that's trying to protect the world, and there could be people out there who could try to use her as a way to get to her boyfriend. And so she asked Iceman to just leave, to leave her alone. And so for Bobby, it's kind of like it's him realizing that he could be the end, or he could be at the end of his actual relationship. But now we have to jump over to Storm and also Charles Xavier. Now, currently, they're in Washington, D.C., attending a meeting with all these different politicians who want to sit down and actually talk about the idea of the Magneto Protocol. Now, we're going to learn more about that here in the next few chapters when it comes to Fatal Attractions. But for right now, you have Senator Kelly really want to go ahead and use the protocols against Magneto to bring him down. But you have this ambassador, better known as Louis St. Croix. Now, Louis is going to be not really important for the overall story, but he will give us a character down the road when it comes to another series that I cover called Generation X. And you see what I mean as we get into that book later on in our coverage over the X-Men. But for right now, all you need to know is that for Ambassador Louis, he hates the idea of the American government trying to use the Magneto Protocol against Magneto so early on. You do have Storm, Charles Xavier, and Ambassador Louis go outside to have a conversation. Now, with this section alone, we do get reminded of a few things going on when it comes to Charles Xavier. Let me explain. So we have to remember that for the rest of the world, they don't actually know that Charles Xavier is a mutant. To the rest of the world, he's just a regular human being fighting for the rights of the mutant race. And that's really it. But on top of that, we also get to learn a tad bit more about the mutant underground. Now, really, I should say that we're not going to learn much about the mutant underground. All we know that apparently Ambassador Louis has been working with Charles Xavier when it comes to the mutant underground. Now, we do learn a tad bit more about Ambassador Louis. We do learn the only reason why he began to help out the mutant race because of his wife. They got into a very severe car accident where she's on the verge of death. But with her kind of laying there dying, her mutant ability activated. Now, the paramedics, they did arrive, but they didn't want to help her. And the reason why, because the way she looked when her mutant ability had activated. And so, unfortunately, she had died. And so, ever since that moment for Louis, he realized that he has to go out of his way to help all mutants across the world. And so, that is why he joined the Mutant Underground. Now we jump back over to the other X-Men team, Bishop, Iceman, and also Rogue. Now they were able to at least capture one of the soldiers who attacked Opal earlier. Now let's not forget, the other soldiers from earlier, when they were defeated, their bodies began to fall apart and turn into a pile of goo. And so you have our heroes realize that sooner or later, this soldier will be the same thing very soon, a pile of goo. And so they're kind of hoping to get some kind of information out of him, like who he works for, but he is not speaking. Now, unfortunately, they don't have Psylocke, Jean Grey, nor Charles Xavier here to read his mind. But you do have Rogue here. And so you have Rogue touch the body of the soldier, except when she does that, her body's going through a lot of serious pain. It seems like her body is being pulled apart and beginning to fall apart and turning into a pile of goo, like we saw in the earlier parts of this chapter. And so right now is Rogue just fighting for her life. Now, I want to jump over to Charles Xavier and Storm because you have these two characters going over to a warehouse in Washington, D.C. And the reason why, because, well, Charles Xavier got word that there's a task force that was put together by the different countries around the world who want to bring down Magneto. But they were also able to create a special kind of suit that would give someone the ability to sneak up on Magneto if they wanted to. And so now you had this task force wanting to create more of those suits to possibly use against Magneto or to possibly use against the mutant race down the road. And so for Charles Xavier, he said, hey Storm, I want you to break into that warehouse and steal that suit so that we are able to give that suit over to Forge. And then maybe he'll be able to create a different version of the suit for us mutants to actually use. Now for Storm, she does have a huge problem with the idea of stealing. And I'll explain why here in a moment, but we have to quickly jump back over to Bishop, Rogue, and also Iceman because you have Bishop being able to grab Rogue and let her actually absorb some of his powers to kind of help calm her down, but also her powers down as well, so that she will no longer lose her actual body. Now, she does tell both Bishop and Iceman that when she did touch the mind of that guy, she did learn something about him and the other soldiers. They were actually created. They were not human beings at all, but they also have a name in their head, somebody they have to follow no matter what. And she says, Hodge. And we already know it has to be the return of Cameron Hodge, coming soon to give the X-Men more problems down the road. I kind of want to jump back over to Storm and also Charles Xavier as a way to wrap up today's video. Now, earlier I had mentioned the fact that Storm has a problem with the whole idea of stealing from the warehouse. And the reason why, because you have Storm basically tell us that when she was a young girl, she ran into Charles Xavier when she was a thief. Now, she thought that he was an easy target, but he wasn't, because he was even a powerful psychic back then, and he knew that he was being targeted to be pickpocketed by Storm, and so he was able to get his wallet back from her. But ever since that moment, it was kind of like she began to leave the life behind of a thief and try to be a better person. But also, she tells us that being an X-Men is not the idea of stealing. Their main goal is to change the world for the betterment. And so for her, she has a problem with the idea of being an X-Men, but now being forced to steal things from a warehouse. And so Storm saying the one time she'll do it for Charles Xavier, but never again, because she hates the idea of being a thief, but it kind of ruins the idea of what an X-Men stands for. And the book kind of ends on that note, where she is able to give Charles Xavier information that he wanted, but she also tells him that she'll never steal for him again. And if he does ask her again, she will leave the X-Men. But this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later. Okay, so getting back into our coverage over the X-Men, guys, we're going to jump into Uncanny X-Men issue number 306. Now, let me tell y'all, this issue really did hurt my feelings. Like, I feel so bad for Archangel because the man does go through the ringer here in this book. But guys, remember, when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men at this point, we're still in the Fatal Attractions era for X-Men comics. Because remember, when it came to Fatal Attractions, you had the main storyline, but you also had other storylines in X-Men comics that took place between chapters of the main storyline. So even though we already covered the first 3 chapters of Fatal Attractions, and we still have 3 more to cover, we still got to cover the storylines that took place between 3 and 4 when it comes to chapters of Fatal Attractions. And so when it comes to Uncanny X-Men, issue number 306 is one of those one-shot story arcs that takes place between the chapters of Fatal Attractions. Now, like I said, this book is really harsh for the character of Archangel. And you see what I mean as we go through today's video. Now, let me just say that the opening pages of this book kind of did bother me as well. And the reason why, because we pick up with Archangel and Jean Grey. Now, if you know your X-Men comics, you know that when it came to Warren and also Jean Grey, these two characters, they had feelings for one another. Really more Warren towards Jean Grey. We could tell that Jean also had some kind of feelings towards Warren in the past in X-Men comics. So as we get into the opening pages of this book, we see the two characters just flying around. It's really more of Archangel carrying her around in the skies and kind of showing a perfect view of what he sees when he's up in the air. Now, you do have the two characters kind of flirt here, but let's not forget that by this point in our coverage over the X-Men, Jean Grey is still with Cyclops. Like, he did leave for a short period of time, but the guy came back and they're like, hey, I love you, you love me, and they're still one happy couple. But it does seem like, you know, you have Archangel and Jean Grey kind of flirting, but at the same time, still staying in that friend zone area. Now, this leads into what I say, man, they put Archangel through the ringer. Now, the reason why I'm saying that, because when it comes to Archangel and Jean Grey, they began to talk about Candy. Now remember, Candy was the ex-girlfriend to Archangel back in the X-Men Inferno days. Now we also have to remember that for Jean Grey and also Archangel, they were on X Factor at that time. But when it came to Candy, she was in love with Archangel, but Archangel was in love with Jean Grey. And so when she walked into the room, she basically saw the man she loved making a move on Jean Grey. And the reason why, because Jean was technically single, because Cyclops was married to Madeline Pryor. Now, once Candy saw what Archangel was doing, she dipped out, she disappeared, and he couldn't find her. Now, he did find her, but unfortunately, he found out that she was being held hostage by his old enemy, Cameron Hodge. Now, Cameron Hodge was somebody who was trying to kill off the entire mutant race. But he's also the leader of an organization known as the Right that has the same goals as he does, to kill off the mutant race. Now, the last time we saw him, we were kind of left to believe that he is dead. But either way, getting back over to Candy, it's Archangel saying like how much he does miss her and wishes that she was back. Well, here's the thing. She walks into the room and it's kind of like, wait a second, you died. How in the world are you here right now in front of Archangel and Jean Grey? Now, I want to jump over to Charles Xavier, Beast, and Quicksilver, who are currently in the Danger Room. Here's the reason why, because you have Charles Xavier going through a Danger Room session. Now, as you all know, the Danger Room is used as a way to train different members of the X-Men. And so for Charles Xavier, he does not really have any fighting skills. Like, yes, he has his mind, but that's really it. And so it's Quicksilver and Beast kind of questioning the whole idea of putting the man through the actual Danger Room session, because it seems like he wants to know how to fight the best way he can. Now, his opponent is Quicksilver. Now, they're not going to fight on the ground. They're going to fight in a simulation of being in space. But while you have the two characters fighting against one another, you do have Charles Xavier bring up Magneto. Now, here's the reason why. Because you now have Charles Xavier now beginning to doubt everything he has done as the leader of the X-Men, but also he's doubting the idea of reaching his goals. The whole idea that mutants and humans can live together. It's him now saying that he feels like those goals are not going to be reachable, but at the same time, if he has to reach those goals, he might have to act a tad bit like Magneto, beginning to change his ways. Now for Quicksilver, it's kind of like, why would you do that? But it's Charles saying, look, I have a perfect example of why my ways don't work. Your father, Magneto, he tried to be me. When I had left, he took over my school, became the leader of the X-Men, the teacher to the New Mutants, and even then, he still went back to his old ways. So what if my ways don't truly work? What if his ways are actually the answer? Now, it's also Charles saying that he's not afraid to cross those lines to be able to defeat Magneto. And so once you had this session done, you have our two characters go to separate ways, but it's now questioning the whole idea of, will Charles actually cross that line when it comes down to him fighting against Magneto? Now, getting back over to Archangel and Jean Grey, for Archangel, he cannot believe that what he is seeing. Like for him, he does not believe in the possibility that this is candy. To him, it's more of, okay, this is another trick being done by Cameron Hodge. And let me explain why he feels that way. And the reason why, because in our last video for Uncanny X-Men, you had Rogue, Iceman, and also Bishop run into some soldiers that were actually created in the lab by Cameron Hodge, it seemed like. And Rogue tried to access their minds. They had nothing on their mind except one thing, Cameron Hodge. Really two things, Cameron Hodge and their assignments. And so for Archangel and Jean Grey, really Jean Grey, she's saying, Archangel, this has to be candy. The way she is talking, the way she is thinking, there's no way that this could be another being created by Cameron Hodge. I kind of hate the idea how everything is getting so like crazy. Then you have the book say, you know what, let's go over here and see what's going on with Storm. Like, I love Storm and all, but in this book, I did not care about her dating life. I only care about what was happening to Archangel. But in the middle of what was happening, they were like, hey, let's go check in with Storm. And really, it's just Storm going on a date with Forge. And she does learn that Forge is now the new leader of X Factor. Now, with that being said, it's also Forge kind of realizing that maybe, just maybe, he was wrong to end things between them. And so he's kind of hoping that they can get back together and possibly rebuild their entire relationship and possibly get married down the road. And for Storm, it's like, hey, you know what? I'm down with that idea. I truly did miss you. And so you have the two characters dance in the middle of the restaurant. Like I said, it's nice and all, but I did not really care. So getting back over to Archangel, but let's go ahead and get into some possible retconning here when it comes to the whole idea of how Candy is alive. Now for Jean Grey and Archangel, they do go into her mind. Now when they go into her mind, they're going to relive the moment she had died by the hands of Cameron Hodge. Now for Archangel, he believed that she was unaware what was happening to her or around her. But in reality, you had Jean Grey say, no, she was aware of everything, the entire battle, the whole idea. She knew that you were too late, that she knew that she was going to die. And so she saw the entire battle, but for Archangel, he believed she died at that moment. But in reality, she did not. And here's the reason why. Because Cameron Hodge was doing some kind of, well, experiments on her. But either way, she does wake up a few weeks later. Now, when she does wake up a few weeks later, you have two guys standing over her, talking about her, saying that she looks very similar to something else, something more original. But either way, there's a third person there, but we can't see him. Now, when Jean Grey tries her best to dive deeper into the mind of Candy, she falls for a psychic trap that was actually placed by Cameron Hodge. Now, really, this was Marvel Comics back then getting ready for the next crossover for the X-Men. So even though we're still right in the middle of Fatal Attractions, they were like, hey, listen, we're going to wrap things up over here, but down the road, the next crossover, you guys got to get ready for it. Now, with all that being said, when it comes to Archangel and Cameron Hodge, Archangel and Jean Grey, they realize that Cameron Hodge, who still is a techno-organic being, was hiding inside the body of Candy. And it seemed like he was using her as a way to hide, but waiting for the right moment to come out to attack Archangel. And so with him coming out, he's now converting her body into more techno-organic material to help repair him to complete his body. So it's Candy slowly dying off, and it's also Cameron Hodge slowly coming back to life and hoping to fight against the X-Men and to kill them off. But here's the thing. For Candy, she hates the idea that she's being used as a way to bring him back to life to attack the man she loves. And so she begins to rip herself apart because technically she's no longer human. She's now techno-organic, just like Karen Hodge is. And so while you have her doing that, it's Karen freaking out because now he realized that his plan is falling apart. Now, this right here is going to explain more down the road in the next crossover once we're able to properly get into that crossover. Yeah, you heard me right, because right now it's kind of like, what's happening? Okay, is that really Candy or not? And right now we're left to believe it is her, but in reality it may not be her. But either way, the book kind of ends with Candy being able to kill herself, which then kills off Cameron Hodge. And the book kind of ends with Archangel just crying because he had to watch the woman he loves die all over again right in front of him, thanks to the hands of Cameron Hodge once again. Like, this man is just having the worst time alongside with Colossus. But this What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men. Now, as you all know, we're currently covering Fatal Attractions. And with us covering Fatal Attractions, it's time for us to dive back into the main storyline once again. And we pick up with the 4th chapter, X-Men issue number 25. Now, this is really important because this is the moment where you have Magneto ripping off the adamantium off the bones of Wolverine. And for the next few years in Marvel Comics, Wolverine would be almost completely different. A character where most fans were not really a fan of because the way he looked and the way he acted. And you see what I mean as we go through today's video, but other videos down the road when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. Now, this is a very huge moment as well for Magneto because it's going to lead into the Onslaught saga down the road when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. But getting into today's issue, and so as we dive into the first page for today's video, we do pick at all the different nations around the world who are coming together to decide what to do when it comes to Magneto. Should they use the Magneto Protocol? Now, the Magneto Protocol is very important for today's video, but also because when it came to Magneto in the earlier parts of our coverage over Fatal Attractions, we saw that Magneto was able to build a base called Avalon out in space, floating right over the Earth. And so for a lot of nations out there, they were kind of worried about the idea that Magneto might try to use that space base as a way to attack the different nations who were going against Magneto and what he was trying to achieve for the mutant race. And so now they're trying to use the Magneto Protocol as a way to protect the Earth, but to hopefully keep him away from Earth from the time being. Now, for the United Nations, they do have a good idea of how to keep Magneto away from the Earth. You see, they had all these different satellites around the Earth, and these different satellites were being used as a way to build up some kind of force field around the Earth. Not a force field, but some kind of field around the Earth that would cancel out the powers of Magneto. So if he tries to come back to Earth, his powers are not going to work at all because he will be inside that field that they had built up. And so for Magneto, it really does tick him off. But here's the thing, for Magneto, he's not trying to go to war against the human race. For him, all he wants to do is take different mutants around the world and bring them back over to Avalon, his space station base. He just wants to give the mutant race a new home away from the human race as a way to protect them. But now with his field being around the Earth, Magneto is no longer able to go back down to Earth to get more mutants and bring them over to Avalon, because if he tries, his powers are not going to work. And so you have Magneto say, fine, if you're going to try to cancel out me, I am now going to try to cancel out you. And so he releases a EMP across the entire world. Like I said, this EMP is affecting the entire world. For example, we jump over to the Fantastic Four, and you have Ben Grimm getting upset because he believes that Reed was playing some kind of trick on him, but then he realized that no, Reed's right now freaking out because Reed is wondering who in the world had just released that kind of powerful pulse across the entire world. We know who it is, but they have no idea. And the trend continues on because we then jump over to Japan and we see Sunfire realizing what is happening across the entire world and also his country as well. We jump over to Great Britain and we pick up with Excalibur for Captain Britain and Nightcrawler. They're also being affected by this EMP that Magneto had just released across the entire world. And so with the entire world being affected by this EMP, of course it gets back over to the X-Men. And so you have the X-Men be lucky, as some places are, to have a second generator to use as a backup, but to also bring their power back online. But now the X-Men know who had done it. And so this leads into a meeting between both the gold team and the blue team of the X-Men. Now, before we dive into this meeting, I want to shift our focus over to Charles Xavier, because for Charles Xavier, this is a man who's kind of now believing in the idea of going down the path of Magneto. And what I mean by that statement is that for Charles Xavier, he's still trying to achieve the goals of mutants and humans being able to live together in harmony, but at the same time, still trying to lead the mutant race into a better place. But for Magneto, who's also trying to lead the mutant race into a better place, the two guys are both trying to achieve that goal, but in different ways. And so for Charles Xavier, he is slowly becoming like Magneto with the idea of go ahead and crossing that line as a way to achieve the different goals that he has set for himself. And the reason why I'm bringing that up, because as we dive into this meeting and you have the X-Men say like, listen, Magneto had released an EMP basically across the entire world. And you had trains, planes crashing all over the world, killing countless lives because Magneto was angry for what the UN had did using the Magneto protocols. And so now it's the X-Men saying there is a war possibly coming very soon. And so the X-Men must step in and stop the war coming before more lives are lost. But for Charles Xavier, it really seems like he is okay with the possibility of crossing that line to protect the world, to stop Magneto. So for the X-Men, they're trying to build up a game plan. But for Charles Xavier, this is a man who had already built a game plan up. First, he says, I am going on this mission because he was able to get a Shi'ar exoskeleton suit to use as a way to walk around. But he has to use his psychic abilities to make the suit actually work. But either way, for Charles Xavier, we could tell this man had already put a team together and a plan together. So for example, he's going to bring Wolverine and Gambit. And the reason why, because those two guys are great when it comes to being stealthy. But then on top of that, it'll be him and Jean Grey. They need both powerful psychics to attack the mind of Magneto as a way to attack him. But then you have Charles bringing in Rogue and also Quicksilver. Now, here's the reason why, because these are two characters who have feelings towards Magneto. Quicksilver, the son of Magneto, and Rogue, not officially an ex-lover just yet, but she did have some hard feelings for Magneto that did not reach the potential of the two characters getting together. But it's way to say, if I can bring in these two characters who have some connection to Magneto, I could use that as a way to bring him down to a defensive position so I'm able to attack his mind in a better position. Now, when they do arrive on Avalon, you have the X-Men being able to sneak on. Now, here's the thing. We have to remember that when it came to the earlier parts of Fatal Attractions, Colossus had joined Magneto. Now, for Colossus, it was really more because this man lost his entire family. His brother committed suicide. His parents were killed off by the Russian government. And then his sister died by the legacy virus. It's him saying, like, I was on your side, Charles Xavier, trying to help you reach your goals. But unfortunately, with me trying to do that, I had lost my entire family in a short period of time. And so it's him kind of believing that Magneto might be a better answer for the mutant race. But it seems like Colossus is still working for the X-Men. And the reason why, because it seems like he's able to turn off all the different security systems in Avalon to make sure that those systems cannot detect the X-Men who had just teleported onto Avalon, to allow them the chance to sneak around the entire base. Now, before we are able to kind of see the X-Men begin to attack Magneto in his base, you have our heroes run into two characters, Fire Fist and Skid. Now, we have talked a lot about these characters in the earlier parts of our coverage over the X-Men when we were covering the Mutant Massacre, Fall of the Mutants, Inferno, because they did play some bigger roles in those comic events when it came to the X-Men, because they were part of X Factor. They were the trainees of X Factor in the early days of that comic book series. But by this point in the coverage over the X-Men, they kind of fell off completely. And so they're kind of just used as a way to move stories along. And that's really it. Like, for example, you have our heroes run into Fire Fist and Skid. Now, the last time our heroes had heard about these two characters, they had been brainwashed by Strife, and they were on his side back in the Executioner song. But their minds was cured by Magneto. Now, here's the thing, because for Fire Fist and also Skid, our heroes still believe in the possibility that maybe they're still brainwashed. But you have our two young heroes saying, no, we're not brainwashed. We truly believe that Magneto might be the best thing for the mutant race. Now, before you have the X-Men be able to debate against these two young mutants, you have Charles Xavier use his powers to put them to sleep because they have to move on with their mission. But now it's time for us to get into the plan of the X-Men. So, for Charles Xavier, what he did was he sent Quicksilver out to put a disk inside the main computer of Avalon. Here's the reason why. Because now with the main computer being under control by Charles Xavier, he's then able to begin to teleport different members of Magneto's acolytes off Avalon to kind of only leave Magneto by himself and maybe just a few members of the acolytes to make things easier for the X-Men. But here comes the problem. You see, as soon as our heroes had did that, Magneto realized what was happening. Magneto realized this was an attack done by the X-Men. And so this man just rips a hole through Avalon to find the X-Men, and this begins the battle between our heroes and their number one enemy. Now, the first two pages of this battle I truly love because you have Wolverine thinking like, you know what, I can take Magneto down by myself. I don't need any help at all. And you have Magneto like, really? You believe that you have the ability to bring me down? Wrong. And send Wolverine flying away easily. Now, for Rogue, it's more of like, listen, she was somebody he was very close to. He actually cared for, maybe even loved. And so it's kind of like, can Rogue bring Magneto down to make him realize that what he is doing is completely wrong? Yeah, no. For Magneto, this is the man who's too driven right now to just give up on his goals. And so he sends Rogue away as well. Now you do have Gambit being able to hit Magneto right in the face to then allow Charles Xavier and also Jean Grey to begin doing work on his mind. Now, what Charles Xavier and Jean Grey are trying to do, it seems like, is to have Magneto relive different moments of his past. But here's the thing. What they're trying to do is to help him recognize that the past is the past. Like, let it go. It happened in the past and you have to move on. But they're also trying to show Magneto everything he did wrong in the past to kind of help him realize the path he had taken many years ago was the wrong path to take. And so they're hoping that this could possibly work. But now we have to shift our focus over to Quicksilver. Because Charles Xavier realized that for Quicksilver, he is something he could use to attack the mind of Magneto as well. Because as Magneto, he has failed as a father for 3 different people. Now remember, we don't technically know just yet that Polaris is also the daughter of Magneto. They have not revealed that just yet. For right now, in this timeline for Marvel, he only had 3 kids. Anya, who died in the past, Quicksilver, and the Scarlet Witch. But it's Quicksilver saying, look at what I have become. It's because the way you tried to raise me. It's the way you tried to be a father to me. And now here I am, a man who's not really able to be with his wife and his daughter. And let's not forget, back over in X Factor, that was a big thing. It was Quicksilver trying to hopefully repair his family, bring them back together, to be with his wife, to be with his daughter. But unfortunately, they can't do it because the way he is, because of Magneto, because he's trying to run away from his past, run away from his connections to his father, who's not a good man at all. But for Magneto, it's all like, listen, I'm being attacked in many different ways, but I gotta stay focused. And so now it's Magneto possibly thinking of killing off his son for going against him. But luckily for Quicksilver, you have Wolverine jump back into the battle. Now, for Wolverine, he understands what's happening here. Magneto is very serious about killing off his son. And because Wolverine is great with stealth, he was able to sneak up on Magneto and cut him across his chest. Now, at first, we don't see any blood because I guess the comic code back then, but like, hey, come on now. We already know the man got messed up by Wolverine claws. But for Magneto, he's not down yet. And so he knows he has to make he knows he has to make Wolverine pay. Sorry for that. But this is the moment where it changes a lot for Wolverine and later comics when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men, but also for other X books as well. Because you didn't have Magneto rip off the adamantium off the bones of Wolverine just like that. And Charles Xavier gets very angry to see what Magneto has done to one of his X-Men. And so for Charles Xavier, enough is enough. He's tired of the killing. He's tired of the battles against Magneto. And so you have Charles Xavier say, you know what? That's it. I'm going to take your mind away. And so we see Charles Xavier being able to do that. And it seems like that Magneto has now fallen into a state where he's technically in a coma. That's it. He's gone. Magneto has lost his mind thanks to Charles Xavier. Now, the book kind of ends on the note where you have Colossus appear. Now, remember, Colossus was the one who brought down a security system on Avalon to allow the X-Men to sneak on. But for Colossus, he's still on Magneto's side. He's all like, listen, I have lost my entire family. Somebody gotta be here to help out Magneto, to take care of him, because right now he's in a state where he's not able to take care of himself. And so you have the X-Men leave, thanks to Bishop flying a Blackbird up there, and hopefully they can save the lives of Charles Xavier and also Wolverine. But this ends today's video for this chapter of Fatal Attractions, as we now move into the next chapter, which is Wolverine issue number 75, the 5th chapter of Fatal Attractions. But again, guys, this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. Guys, see y'all next time. Later. What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men. As you all know, we are currently covering Fatal Attractions. Now, we already covered the first 4 chapters of this crossover, but now it's time for us to get into the 5th chapter, and this will be Wolverine issue number 75. Now, here's the thing. This entire issue is kind of where we basically see an entire change in the character of Wolverine, but also for some people out there, this was the last issue they had collected when it came to Wolverine, because after this point, he goes through a complete change, and fans were not really happy about the idea of the way they were going with Wolverine. And you'll see what I mean as we go through today's video and also other videos down the road when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. Now, for the 5th chapter of Fatal Attractions, it does pick up where the last chapter left off at. And remember, for the last chapter, we saw Magneto rip off the adamantium off the bones of Wolverine. And so right now, his healing factor has gone into overdrive. It's trying to repair all the damage that was done to his body thanks to Magneto. Now, with all that being said, let's also not forget that our heroes had defeated Magneto on his space base Avalon. Now, Bishop was able to bring a modified version of the Blackbird to get those heroes off the base and try to bring them down to Earth. The problem is that the Blackbird was not really made for re-entry. So right now, the Blackbird is slowly falling apart. But you have Charles Xavier and Jean Grey trying to access the mind of Wolverine to keep him somewhat sane. And the reason why, because all the pain he's going through at the moment, thanks to Magneto, is bringing back all the bad memories in his mind all at once. And that could cause some serious damage to the mind of Wolverine. And so for Jean Grey, she feels like they should just go ahead and erase all these bad things in his mind that had happened to him. But for Charles, he says, no, you can't do that, because all these bad moments in his mind, they're part of his personality. They're part of him. If you try to get rid of that, it could completely change him or possibly break his mind. So unfortunately, we have to sit here and to make sure that all these different bad memories do not come together all at once to break the mind of Wolverine. Now, I should tell you that when it comes to this issue, we're going to jump back and forth with the whole idea of Bishop and the rest of the X-Men, minus Charles Xavier and Jean Grey, trying to keep the Blackbird together long enough so they're able to land safely, while you have Charles Xavier and Jean Grey trying to work on the mind of Wolverine. So we see our heroes doing everything they can to just keep the Blackbird together, but it seems like every single time they get one thing handled, something else just pops off when it comes to the Blackbird. It's Bishop panicking. We're kind of left to believe in the possibility that our heroes are going to die. Now, you do have Charles Xavier call out for more McTaggart on the radio. Here's the reason why. Because for Charles Xavier, thanks to his battle with Magneto in the last chapter, the man is almost completely drained of energy. And so this is Charles Xavier calling out to Moira saying, listen, I need you to talk me through all the different things I need to do when it comes to medical stuff to keep Wolverine alive, while I try my best to use my energy to keep his mind together. Now, while you have those two characters talking, Jubilee is in the room. Let's not forget that back in the 70s and 80s, Kitty Pryde was more the sidekick to Wolverine. She was kind of like the daughter for Storm and Wolverine. They were like her mother and father. But in the 90s, she left, went over to Excalibur, and then left the door open for somebody else to take that role. And there came Jubilee. And so Jubilee is hearing the possibility that Wolverine might die. And so she's wondering if there's any way he could possibly survive. Now, I kind of hate to repeat myself, but we got to jump back over to the rest of the X-Men who are trying to keep the Blackbird together. And the reason why I want to call back over to that, because this is a callback to the Phoenix Saga. Because as you have our heroes on the Blackbird trying to re-enter the Earth, they're going through a radiation storm like they did back in the Phoenix Saga. And of course, as we all know, the X-Men back then was Jean Grey trying her best to keep the spaceship together to protect her friends and her lover Cyclops. Now, back then, it did lead into her supposedly turning into the Phoenix until some retcons happened. But either way, for our heroes, they're going through another radiation storm. And so while going through that, the other X-Men who are back at the X-Mansion, like Cyclops, he's freaking out because he's having flashbacks to what happened to Jean Grey back then. He believes that she is going to die once again while trying to survive this whole idea of going through another radiation storm. But for Charles Xavier, while trying to work on the mind of Wolverine, it's Wolverine going through or reliving the worst moments of his past. The whole idea of Weapon X, Magneto ripping off the adamantium off his bones. It's Wolverine having a hard time just trying to keep his mind together. And Charles right now is trying his best to keep Wolverine's mind together. But for Wolverine, he then tells Charles that he hears music. It's all the people that he had loved in the past who had died singing to him, calling out to him. Now for Charles, he knows what that means. It's basically death calling out for Wolverine. Is Wolverine on the verge of dying? Is Charles saying, Logan, don't go that way. You are going to die. But for Logan, he wants to die. He wants to go ahead and just move on his life and go over to the afterlife. Now, this leads into, this leads into a discussion I kind of want to have. And the reason why, because, over the years in Marvel Comics, right, we always say that Jean Grey is madly in love with Cyclops. Like, that's her first love no matter what. And Wolverine is always her second choice. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up, because over the years, you would have X-Men fans look back at different moments and be like, hey, at that time right there, you could tell that Jean Grey would rather be with Wolverine than Cyclops. And for me personally, this is one of those moments. And let me explain why. Because you have Wolverine trying to go into the afterlife. He's okay with the idea of dying and moving on with his life. But the thing is, Illyana, the angel, say, no, it's not your time to die. And so while pushing him away, he hears all the other members of the X-Men calling out to Jean. And the reason why, because Jean Grey is about to die. She is about to be sucked out of the Blackbird and possibly die. And so she's hanging for her life. And so the other X-Men are not able to get to her. And so with her hanging for her life and them calling out for her, is Logan saying, I can't die yet because Jean Grey needs me. And so at the very last second, when it seems like Jean is going to die, Logan saves her by pulling her back in. But when he does, she says, Logan, you came back for me. And Logan said, no, I came back because you needed me. You called me back. Like, I came back here because I wanted you. And so it kind of seems like to me that Jean Grey would, be with Wolverine. It kind of seems like, hey, she's still technically, just a girlfriend of Cyclops, not fiance, not wife. Like, she could still leave Cyclops for Logan. And there is a chance here for it to happen. Now, some time has passed by after that moment where you had the heroes being able to get back to the X-Mansion safely. Now, Wolverine is supposed to be on the sideline. It's Logan. There's no way he'll be on the sideline for too long. So you have the different X-Men, in the danger room going through a training session. And the reason why I'm bringing this up right now, because while you have the X-Men going through this training session, you have Logan wanting to get in. He's like, hey, you know what? Let me in. I want to see if I still have it. Now, his body is still recovering after what Magneto did to him. And so for Logan, as he goes through this actual training session, he's not what he used to be. Not as fast, not as strong. Like, he is really slowed down a lot and taking some big hits, and it really does hurt him a lot as well. But not being able to hit hard as he used to be. Now, this is the moment where you have fans kind of wondering, okay, where are they going to go next when it comes to Wolverine? Because as we all know, Wolverine's bones were laced with adamantium. If that was ripped off his body, does he still have his claws? And the answer is yes, he does. We learn right here that apparently his claws were bone claws that were originally laced with adamantium. And so that's why he had claws in his, hands. And so for Wolverine, he pops it out. But the problem is healing factor is still working overdrive here. And so when he does pop his claws out of his hand, he bleeds a lot. He's in serious pain. He's not able to properly heal up like he should. It's like, oh my God, they have to call in the medical team. The ending of this book is Wolverine leaving the X-Men. And the reason why, because he has to figure out about his life, because he had no idea at first that he had those claws, those bone claws. He believed that originally the claws were implants, but now he's realizing that that's not true, that the adamantium just covered his bone claws. And so now he's wondering more about his past, but also kind of wondering what to do with his life. So he leaves a message, a letter for each member of the X-Men. But for Jubilee, it's him telling her, like, hey, I need you to stay here with Charles Xavier. Like, he can help you. He can guide you like he did me and the others. And so you have Logan leave. And that ends Fatal Attractions for the 5th chapter of this crossover. We still have one more chapter, and that would be Excalibur. And that would be our next video. So with that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.